Okay, everybody is present at a meeting of the Planning Commission. We have an agenda, and it is 7 o'clock. We have a quorum, so let's call the meeting to order. Would the secretary please take the roll?
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Okay. My name is Phil Green, and I'm the new chair of the Planning Commission. And only since we happen to have an audience of various people here, sometimes we're not as popular, I just wanted to make a brief statement about what the Planning Commission does. First of all, we're all volunteers here, and we're here to help you and to help the town. We're not here to punish. We're not here to tell anybody off. We're here to make sure that if you have a project you want to build in this wonderful town, that it's done safely and properly. That's basically all I want to say about that. So nobody should be afraid to apply for building permits. It's all for your better property. Okay, so the first next order of business will be approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any comments on the agenda? Okay, so anybody care to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second the agenda.
Okay, let's take a vote on the motion to approve the agenda. Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 And no nays, I assume. Aye. We have more of a quorum now. Okay. Oh. Okay, generally now at this point we will take public comments on items that are not on the agenda. So if anybody has, with a 3-minute limit, if anybody has any comments on items that are not on the agenda, please come forward. Okay, we do not appear to have any public comments on non-agenda items. So then we will move on to the consent items. But before we do that, actually, I wanted to ask staff what would be an appropriate time to present.
Right now?
Now? Okay. So what we have, ladies and gentlemen, is a special evening. We have two wonderful and long-term planning commissioners timing out, and they've decided to time out. And so we have a proclamation from the town of Fairfax, signed by myself, regarding these two people. And if Brennan could stand up for a moment so everybody knows who you are as well. And this is Shelby Lamont here, Brennan Ketchum, two people who have volunteered wonderfully over the years to serve our town and have made the Planning Commission the wonderful thing it is today. So I'm going to take the time to read these proclamations. Ladies first. Whereas Commissioner Shelby Lamont has served the citizens of Fairfax as a member of the Planning Commission from January 30th, 2008 through January 31st, 2015, and whereas Shelby has worked tirelessly and in the best interest of the community and its residents as the landscaping and plant design person in the know. I do not know what we're going to do without you. During that time, to ensure that the projects respected the natural environment as well as to serve the needs of residents. Shelby has reviewed and acted on planning issues that run the gamut from slide repairs and encroachment permits to matters with town-wide impact, such as the adoption of an updated and comprehensive tree ordinance. She has provided an example of professionalism and dedication to her fellow commissioners, citizens, and staff. Shelby has served the Commission representative on the Fairfax Tree Committee starting November 2012, with her last meeting January 26, 2015. So she's still on the Tree Committee, which I can say thank goodness for that. Shelby has stood unbendingly for the principles of good government and for environmental protection. She is leaving the Commission to concentrate on family and her own local landscape architecture company, which she runs with her husband, Gary Roth. She'll be stepping down from the Commission as of January 31st, and after serving as Commissioner for the last time, January 15th, 2015, Planning Commission. Whereas Shelby Lamott leaves her position as Planning Commissioner with the heartfelt thanks of her fellow Commissioners and town staff, now therefore it be resolved that Shelby Lamott be commended for her years of dedicated service to the town, where she gave freely of her time and landscape architecture expertise to make Fairfax a better place. And my 1 year on this commission, I can say that that is absolutely true, that we have all benefited. So Shelby, thank you. And Brandon Ketchum, who has been on this commission for more than Shelby, a year or so more. He has served the citizens of Fairfax as on this commission and its chair a few times, I understand, from January 3rd, 2007 through December 31st, 2014. Brandon has worked tirelessly in the best interest of the community and its residents as the chair of the Planning Commission from December 17, 2009 through January 19, 2012, and again from February 2014 through December 18, 2014. Brandon has reviewed and acted on planning issues that run the gamut from straightforward use permits for home offices and accessory structures and encroachment permits to groundbreaking matters such as the opening of the Bicycle Museum and the adoption of the town's 50% remodel ordinance. Whereas his calm ability to oversee interactive discourse between applicants, that's a very nice way of saying maintaining order in a crazy situation sometimes, which he does. Between applicants, citizens, and commissioners was masterful, with the results being compromising decisions that left people satisfied, if not totally happy. I think Brandon has left a lot of people, both sides, feeling they got something and they're happy. Different views. Brandon has worked diligently on updating the Fairfax General Plan, completing the draft in 2010 and recommending adoption to the Town Council in 2012. Brandon has stood unbendingly for the principles of good government and for environmental protection, and has now moved on to spend more time with his family. And not to worry, kids, you won't have to watch your dad on TV, but it wasn't that great, was it? I mean, for kids. But he was great. Your dad was a great planning commissioner and chair. Brandon has stepped down from the position as of December 31st, 2014. And now, therefore, it being resolved that the town of Fairfax thanks Brandon Ketchum for his dedicated service to the town and declares that the town of Fairfax owes him a debt of gratitude because of the many years he gave freely of his time to make Fairfax a better place. Thank you very much, Brandon. Speeches?
Very quickly, I'll keep it short, I promise. Last month I was able to express my appreciation to the Commission and all the great work that I think all of you do, I failed to formally recognize Jim and Linda, and I just wanted to make sure that that doesn't get left out, that Linda has, I mean, my 8 years on the commission, Linda's always been there and been very dependable and keeps everything moving. And when Jim came on, I think it was 6 years ago, it changed how this town has a chance of working. And so I wanted to make sure that that's acknowledged, because I've appreciated it as a commissioner, as a community member, and a resident of the town. And the last thing is, 8 years is a long time. It's not that I don't like this. I actually love being a planning commissioner. I very much appreciate serving the town. My kid's 7.5, so I've been on the commission longer than I've had kids. So I think it's good. It's good to have lots of variety and things going on. So much appreciation. Once in a while I'll come here. Once in a while I'll tune in on TV. And thank you.
Sure. Anybody else want to comment from the commission? Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for your years of service. And having served with you, Brandon, we were appointed at the same time. And I understand, you know, wanting to move on with family and everything, but want you to know that you'll be much missed. And I think the combination that both of the two of you bring of passion and commitment to the town and to your service for a very high, well-paying job, volunteer, is phenomenal. And our town is such a better place because of it. I'm a better commissioner because of it. And the balance that you both bring of your passion, your amazing expertise. One of the things about the past 8 years on this, the past 8 years on this commission has been the extraordinary complementary levels of expertise and the ability for all of us to respect each other's areas of expertise, look to each other, depend on each other, and know that we were using our areas of expertise in the best service of this town, not for any particular agenda. So that while you may have had an area of expertise in soils or in landscaping, if someone else brought up information about buildings and setbacks and uses, you were able to listen to it openly and hear that conversation and take it all into account, and that we all worked collaboratively and cooperatively to honestly come to the best solution, both up here on the dais and with the folks that came before us, and that we acted as a team. And I really, really appreciated what both of you brought to that. And Brandon, your leadership during that time in helping us be the best that we could be up here in service of the town was phenomenal. And I thank you. I'm going to miss you. And I'll be calling you to show up out there instead of up here.
Anything else? Okay. You guys will be sorely missed. Okay, we move on to public hearing items. And we move on to consent items. And we have two of those, I believe. One to be continued. So we have 1820 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Report from staff.
We've put this on consent, so I would just ask if anyone in the audience is here to speak to 1820 Sir Francis Drake that's not in support of the project. Okay, so then the commission can leave it on consent and take action, or if any of the commissioners have concerns, you can ask that it be removed and be placed on the public hearing calendar.
Question?
Well, we're just on 1820, right?
Or any other comments from the commission on 1820 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard?
I just had a clarification question. The discussion around the door being closed and the music staying inside, was that a formal condition in the language of the approval.
I will double check.
I'm supportive of this. I don't want to pull it. I just want to make sure that the discussion items showed up in the formal language of the approval.
Well, we included a condition that it has to remain consistent with their proposal, but it doesn't actually reiterate again that the music has to stay inside.
And the hours, that was just an example. You know, there was the hours of operation, there was the music inside, all of which I think were amenable from the applicant. I just want to make sure that it's documented appropriately.
Well, then, maybe recommend that some of the discussion items under discussion on page 2 be included as conditions, such as the two we just discussed, having music inside and
I think they can just do
hours of
that, right,
operation.
without taking it off. So I think I would just include that, and you have to make a motion to approve it. So whoever makes the motion should make the motion to approve it, subject to the conditions listed in the resolution, including the following 2 additional conditions, and then we can put them in.
Why don't we do that then?
Okay.
Why don't we say that? That's fine. Let's see, where do we want to add those conditions then?
I think you can just add them at the very end as conditions 9 and 10.
Yeah. Okay, so condition 9 would be all music shall remain indoors.
And the last one would be subject to the hours of operation as outlined in the discussion, staff report discussion.
Yes, the hours of operation are also relisted in your findings, but I think that's fine. Hours of operation as discussed.
Well, we could take paragraph 2 of the whereas clauses perhaps and make it paragraph 10 of the conditions. Can we do that? That would cover the field.
Great. Yep.
And then paragraph 3 of the whereas will become paragraph 2, and et cetera. But the condition numbering won't change except the addition of 9, which is the music indoors, and 10, which incorporates the language of section 2 of the whereas. So with those, any other comments? Looking forward to having tea here, because some of this tea I haven't seen since I was in China. It'd be interesting. Anybody care to make a motion? Do I hear a motion?
I'd like
Sure.
to make a motion to approve consent calendar with the additional conditions as described.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion as stated carries. And you have a 10-day appeal period. What is the fee? $500 fee to appeal to the city council. Please check with staff before proceeding. Okay, moving on to, apparently there's been a request for 127 Dominga Avenue to continue this to the next hearing date to allow the applicant to further document their request. So do we need a motion for that?
That's on consent.
Okay, that's on consent. So we're all set. We'll continue this to the next February 18th, 19th.
So, Mr. Chair, just for the record, if anyone is here for 1820 Sir Francis Drake or 127 Dominga, they're done.
Yes, you're done with those properties for today. Okay. Agenda item number 3, which is (164) Willow Avenue. Staff report, please.
Okay. The applicants are requesting discretionary permits to construct a 1,461 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath, single-family residence. And that square footage includes the 415 square foot 2-car garage. So the actual amount of living space is just a little over 1,000 square feet. The property, when they did the survey for the property, they discovered that some of the developments on either side had encroached onto this property. The duplex uphill has an entry stairway that crossed the property line and also has rear retaining walls and a patio that cross onto this property. The downhill property, their fence had actually been built 4 feet onto this property. The survey that was prepared by a licensed surveyor. It was sent to the county for recordation where it was checked. His work was checked by another surveyor that's employed by the county, an objective surveyor, and only then does the survey get recorded. So we rely on that when we review the development. The project requires a Hill Area Residential Development Permit. The site is 8,620 square feet in size, and it slopes up from Willow Avenue at a rate of 39%. It was created in this configuration back before the town's incorporation in the 1800s. It was recorded. Did I say when it was? Oh, I'm sorry, 1907 it was recorded, and it has existed as a private piece of property with someone paying taxes on it since that time. So the fact that it's substandard based on today's requirements, in the 70s the town increased all their setback regulations, they increased the minimum lot size requirements based on slope. It didn't make this property undevelopable, it rendered it what's called legal non-conforming. The town doesn't have a right to take someone's property away from them. So that's why they're going through the Hill Area Residential Development Permit process, that and the amount of excavation that they have to do to create the parking that's required by the town code. The purpose of the HRD development permit is to encourage the retention of natural site features, minimize grading, and provide for safe ingress-egress, minimize runoff and erosion, and prevent the loss of life, reduce injuries and property damage, and to ensure that infill development is of a size and scale that's appropriate for the neighborhood. The project site is zoned for the project site is actually zoned for single family and duplex use. It's in our RD 5.5-7 zone. So the applicants could be applying for a duplex, but they've chosen to apply for a single family home. The house has been located as close to the improved public street as is possible while also complying with the town's parking requirements, because as anyone that lives in Fairfax knows, parking is at a premium in Fairfax, and we no longer allow people to build homes unless they provide parking for their residents. But they haven't created any large outdoor backyards with retaining walls, so they've done the minimum excavation that they need to do in order to put the parking in, and they've built the house above that. The town engineer has reviewed a lot of reports. He's reviewed the survey, he's reviewed the development plans, he's reviewed soils engineering reports that address the slopes, the soil stability, drainage issues. And after reviewing all the information and doing a site inspection, he has determined that the site can be developed without geologic, hydrologic, or seismic hazards, either to the property owners themselves or to neighboring homes. All new houses in Fairfax also require design review approval. The Planning Commission acts as the design review board, and there's criteria set forth in the code. The commission has to be able to find that the architecture is of a quality to enhance the neighborhood and not negatively impact the value of neighboring homes. So the residence has been set back from the road to accommodate the parking, but the location also minimizes the impact of the three-story structure on the street facade by stepping up the hill. The design incorporates a covered porch, upper floor dormer, and trellises over the garage and front entryway to add articulation to the building and avoid monotony in its external appearance. The alternating use of stucco and board and batten siding also increases the exterior articulation. The project requires an excavation permit. The town code allows the building official to approve excavation amounts under 100 cubic yards, but whenever a project gets to 100 cubic yards or more, it requires the Planning Commission review and approval. And as I said before, the excavation amount is necessary for the house to comply with the parking and get the driveway at the right slope and the floor elevation at an appropriate level so that cars can drive in without bottoming out. The project requires exceptions to the town regulations, variances for the following two items. It requires a wall height variance because of the way the property slopes up steeply right at the road. Our code limits retaining walls anywhere within the first 6 feet of the property to 4 feet in height. While that works fine on a gently sloped site or a flat site, retaining walls and fences can be kept to 4 feet. When you're trying to provide access from the edge of the road to the garage, the retaining walls on this site are going to get to 11 feet, similar to the driveway retaining walls 2 doors up, the more recent home that had to provide parking. You see other homes lower on Willow where they weren't required to put parking in, and therefore they were able to avoid having to address this wall height issue. They're also requesting a variance of the combined side yard setback. Most of the homes in Willow were built when the setback regulations, we just had minimum setback regulations, and you could build 5 feet from one side, 5 feet from another. In the 70s, they adopted combined side setbacks as well. So the applicants have side setbacks that are greater than most of the homes you see out there in that neighborhood. But they are requesting a 2-foot exception to have a combined side yard setback of 18 feet instead of the required 20 feet. And that's because the house is going to be kept at 20 feet in width. That's a pretty narrow house. So staff feels that the exceptions that they're requesting are not unreasonable to allow development of the house, and they're more than what, the setbacks are more than a lot of what the homes maintain that you see in the neighborhood. I already addressed the fact that the neighboring homes, when you go out and look at the site looks narrower than it really is. The downhill neighbor called and thought that the story poles were incorrect. Well, it wasn't the story poles that were incorrect. They are 8 feet from the property line. It's the fence downhill that's 4 feet into this property, and the access stairway on the duplex encroaches onto this property, making it visually in the field look narrower than it actually really is. The town engineer was concerned because the house, the property line in this case is actually right at the edge of the paved road. And so he is asking that the Planning Commission include a condition, and we have included it as a recommended condition, that the applicants prior to issuance of the building permit set up a maintenance easement that gives the town the legal right to go onto their property if we need to maintain our road. Other agencies had standard conditions. The water district always requires backflow prevention, and they have to get a permit from them for their hookup. The same with the sanitary district. The Ross Valley Fire Department is going to require a sprinkler system be placed in this house. And based on our ability to make the required findings for all the exceptions, we're recommending that the applicant, oh, I forgot one thing. We received kind of late in the game, not due to anyone's fault, but a report from the Fairfax Open Space Committee. And they raised a number of issues and asked for some clarification on some items. So I'm going to do that before I tell you our recommendation. They questioned the number of trees being removed that staff talked about in the staff report, and they are absolutely correct. I looked at the footprint of the house and I said that only 2 trees were coming out for the house, but actually that's not correct. 5 trees are going to come out to build the house, 2 in the driveway area, 2 within the footprint of the house, and 1 oak tree down slope of the house that's just too close to really survive due to the height and depth of the retaining walls that need to be built. There's a report attached to the staff report that was done by an arborist. He also makes recommendation for the removal of additional trees on the property. And those removals are not being required for the house construction. They're being required to help the health of the healthiest oak trees. So there's some oak trees that are crowding more healthy specimens that are not as healthy. So he's asking that some of those come out. There's a eucalyptus that he's recommending come out, and some madrones. But it's 5 trees are being removed for the construction of the house itself. And we wanted to remind the commission that prior to removing any of the trees, whether in the vicinity of the house or on the unimproved hillside, the owner will need to obtain tree permits from the tree committee. So you approving the house doesn't automatically make the trees come out. You know, they'll have to get the tree approvals before they remove any trees and before they get a building permit. The Open Space Committee also asked for clarification on the amount of excavation the project will require. We, in the staff report, used the number 100, and what we were just trying to explain the amount that makes them subject to your review of the excavation. The amount of material being removed will actually be 386 square feet. Yeah, cubic yards to put in the parking, the 20 by 20 foot parking space. With regards to the level of CEQA review, they raised the issue that perhaps because of the animal wildlife that has been seen on this site and adjacent sites, that there should have been a higher level of environmental review. The next level is a negative declaration. The CEQA specifically exempts single-family homes from being subject to CEQA. And the town attorney has told us that in order to require a higher level review on a single family home, the project has to present unusual circumstances and that it will create a reasonable possibility that a significant environmental impact will result from the unusual circumstance. A good deal of the housing stock in Fairfax is constructed on sloping lots steeper than this. There's no evidence that there's any endangered or protected flora or fauna found only on this site and not otherwise found throughout the neighborhood that would warrant raising this house to a negative declaration level. Likewise, the minor variances being requested are categorically exempt unless the project presents unusual circumstances where the variance will have a significant impact on the neighborhood. The project maintains greater side setbacks than many of the other homes in the neighborhood, and therefore the design does not present any unusual circumstances to warrant a negative declaration or an environmental impact report. Other new residences in the neighborhood on upslope lots have driveway retaining walls that exceed the permitted heights to accommodate the town's parking requirements, including but not limited to 15 Maple Avenue, 93 Chester, and 176 Willow. So based on all that information and what we discussed covered in the staff report, we're recommending that you adopt the resolution approving application 1447. And that would conclude our report.
Could you just reiterate the backyard retaining?
Thank you.
The planning director would like me to reiterate that this project is not proposing any retaining walls in the backyard. The retaining walls that you see in the backyard are retaining walls for the duplex's patio, the duplex uphill. So they're not building any retaining walls on the property for the benefit of this new house.
And Mr. Chair, if I may add, I'd just like to reiterate that the structure without the garage would be 1,046 square feet, a very modest home. And echoing what Linda said with regards to staff's response to the letter from the members of the Open Space Committee, I would just like to point out that we pulled this from the December agenda when it came to our attention that a property referenced in the appendix of the general plan included this property without its APN number. It was a vague reference, and when it came to our attention, we pulled it. And being the holiday season, I can't speak for the Open Space Committee, but there was never a full hearing on the letter you received by the Open Space Committee. It was a group of 5 members from the Open Space Committee that weighed in on the property. So technically, you're not actually getting a recommendation from the Open Space Committee. You're getting a recommendation from 5 members of the Open Space Committee. Second, to echo what Linda said about the CEQA, we see no unusual circumstances on this site versus the other properties around the site. And while in the letter you received from the 5 members of the Open Space Committee, referencing other species in the area and the need for reports to that effect, it works in the opposite. You have to have substantial evidence that there is something unusual about the site to trigger it. It works actually in the reverse. And then I would remind you, we are at the end of the Permit Streamlining Act period of 60-day period of review for this. So it will be necessary for the Planning Commission to take action tonight, unless the applicant wanted to allow it to go on, which we're not anticipating, and we would recommend you to actually take action tonight. And then you're going to probably hear from 1 or 2 members of the Open Space Committee, one of which actually is a neighbor of the site, and we may have follow-up after the public testimony in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that excellent report. Any of us on the commission have questions of staff?
The retaining wall, was there exploration of other options not to have such a high retaining wall that they went through, that you went through? Other thoughts on the height and the volume of the retaining wall?
No, because of the slope. I mean, you could make the retaining wall lower, but it wouldn't adequately support the hillside. It would result in more excavation. You lower the hillside, you have to slope the site back, and that would result in more soil being removed.
There is mention in the staff report about potentially asking the owner to make plantings at the top of these 11-foot retaining walls to sort of help keep soil in place and stuff like that. I was thinking of making that a condition. What do you think? What do you think of that possibility?
That's fine. That's been done in the past. Plantings at the top with some kind of trailing vine, or just treatment of the wall itself. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions from commissioners? Okay. Well, now I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward and make any statement or presentation on their behalf. Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Ryan Conley, a member of the G Design team, in attendance today for David Grabham, who had attended the previous meeting on December 18th. During the December 18th meeting, it was brought to the staff's attention that the parcel in question at 164 Willow Avenue fell within the open space district and required open space review. And so this meeting was then continued until tonight. David's unable to attend tonight's meeting due to previous engagements, so I am here on behalf of David. I have worked closely with David throughout the project in developing the plans, as well as having numerous meetings with the Fairfax Planning Department and other individuals involved. During the rescheduling of this meeting, a letter was received from the neighbor downhill at 160 Willow Avenue. This letter expressed various concerns regarding the development of the site, and it was brought to the attention later on during the month that the story poles may have been placed incorrectly. As previously indicated by Linda Neal, the story poles were placed correctly. It just ends up being that the existing wire fence on site is actually 4 feet over the property line at its greatest mark and 2 feet at its least mark. Within the staff report letter dated January 15th, the staff recommends the approval of the project, given that resolutions 14-16 are adopted prior to the issuance of a building permit. Our design team has reviewed these resolutions, and we're prepared to accept these resolutions and include them within our submittal for a building permit, given that no additional resolutions are proposed during this meeting. If additional resolutions are proposed during the meeting tonight, we would ask for a continuance until February for a final Planning Commission decision, given that it would give the entire design team time to review those resolutions and to see if we can meet those resolutions that are proposed tonight. We would like to thank the Planning Commission, Open Space Committee, neighbors and residents along Willow Avenue, and other Fairfax staff and community members not mentioned herein for their involvement and contribution throughout the process. The design team has worked hard to develop a new residence that met the criteria and unique standards set forth both within the site and both within the town ordinance. We feel we've accomplished this by not only maintaining the required setbacks, except for the proposed combined setback, as well as staying within height restrictions for the residence itself. With David being a long-standing member of the Fairfax community, this residence was developed in mind to provide a positive environment and positive impact upon the neighborhood as well as the community. The applicant is only looking to build a single-family home in which he can further develop a family within Fairfax and continue to contribute to the community here.
Okay, thank you. I do have one question, and that is there are 3 technical parking spaces. 2 are in the garage, and 1 is out front, sort of to the right, on the right of the driveway. I just wondered if the owner can express whether he needs to, whether he will be able to use the garage for parking. A lot of people store things in garages, and in that particular neighborhood, we're going to want them to use those parking spaces. So that's the question.
So we've worked early on with the client to develop the set of plans for his needs and for his intent in using the property. When discussing the possible options for the garage, he realized that due to the size of the lot, he's limited as far as how wide he can make the garage. He's taken that into consideration, and what we're proposing is that any storage in the garage would probably be lifted. The garage is, I believe, around 9 to 10 feet in height, and so with that in mind, even if a car was parked in that space, there would still be storage room up above for potential storage that may come from the house or from the resident living there for a longer period of time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners of the owner or the applicant?
I have a question. There's concern about the height of the retaining walls on the driveway and how we can mitigate the appearance of those walls, which is a tall order, no pun intended. And I noticed that on the grading and drainage plan, Glendurth has planters as stormwater retention structures, and I don't see them on the regular plans, but that is an opportunity where you can plant in those planters, articulate the wall, kind of break up that big face of the wall, get plants up higher so that the highest exposed face of the wall, about halfway or more back into the driveway, is only 6 feet at any one place. And so I know that we can't, ask them to change the plans right now, but it's shown on the drainage plan and it's part of this package, and I would say that that's an important part, that's a critical part of meeting that condition, and also kind of reducing the visual impact of that side of the wall. And I think it would be important to show that somehow, or at least discuss it in our conditions so that the overall plans have that in it.
Can I just clarify? I saw one area that was at the top of the wall, but it didn't seem to extend down very far. I mean, the drainage plan is a part of the approval. It's listed, yeah, so I mean...
Maybe we
But
need
maybe
to,
you
but
want
I just
more?
wanted to make sure that, because sometimes we get drainage and grading plans as preliminary for planning, and, it's not always the final design. So I just wanted to make sure that you have that in your mind, that in your grading and drainage plan, and then it somehow gets incorporated into the overall. I'm searching. I'm on, say, page C2, where it shows, um, bioretention basin planters on the south wall, about midway down the wall. And the other side has the stairs, so I think that breaks up that side. So I think you've kind of got it within your package. I just want to bring that to everyone's attention because that's a design opportunity on that one. And an ability to get, you know, whether it's vines growing on that wall or something tall in there, small trees, whatever, depending on what the soil type is in there. So that's my comment, to just kind of bring that to the surface a little bit.
So we definitely plan to address the height of the wall. We're still having discussions with the client right now regarding his, what he would like. We've been talking with him lately about doing vines that would climb down the wall. We're also talking about doing some architectural details along the wall that would potentially break up that facade. And so instead of it appearing to be an 11-foot facade at that high point, it would be broken up with maybe some additional stone inlay or maybe just some architectural wood detail that could be inlaid within that masonry work. And so as much as we'd like to have a lower height wall, and the client would like to have a lower height wall, just due to the slopes presented on site, we're required to have that 11-foot. The civil plans in question were developed after the proposed floor plan, and so the civil plans just weren't reincorporated into the architectural set. We would be more than willing to reincorporate some of those details within our building permit submittal, just so that that information is also shown on the architectural set of plans as well as the civil set of plans.
I do want to say one thing very positive about this project, and that is that it's an incredibly well-designed and compact house. I looked at all the floors, and the rooms seem to be really well laid out, and it's an example of, you know, smaller housing and better housing. So the overall design is very good. But I think and are there any other comments? Okay.
I have a question. Can you hear me okay? I have a question about the letter by Elizabeth and Victor Harris. In their letter, they talk about 2 oaks, 15 feet from 2 oaks of our, okay, so there are 2 large oak trees that might be impacted by the development of the site. I was just wondering if the arborist had taken a look at those oaks for impacts. Especially, it's hard to tell where the drip lines are on the plans, but I was wondering if that had been taken into consideration.
So unfortunately, due to California law, our arborist wasn't allowed to access that property unless they had prior approval from those property owners. We weren't able to have contact with those property owners prior to having the arborist stop by our site, and so the arborist was only able to do his survey within our site and our property lines. Because if he was to overstep his boundaries, then he would potentially be trespassing, which would raise issues for him.
Would your client be open to a study of those trees just to make sure that they're not impacted, and if they are, then maybe some kind of mitigation measure could be taken?
I would need to have a discussion with the client regarding that, but given the proximity of the trees to his property line, I think it would benefit both our client and the neighbors downhill at 160 to have those trees included within the arborist report to see if they would be affected by the excavation.
Okay, thank you.
On previous projects that we've done, we have situations where the drip line of the tree overhangs the property, but the trunk of the tree isn't in the lot, and that kind of is great for humans that draw lines on the ground, but it doesn't work for trees. And with the understanding that the roots also cross the property line. You have a really good arborist report here that has language for tree protection measures, and I would recommend that we put in some language that says something to the effect of all the trees within the report and an understanding of the drip line of overhanging trees and the roots that correspond with that tree, because those are on your property. And I mean, he could go there and look at them without having to go on the property. So it would be helpful for us maybe to think about that for the tree ordinance, to have some language about that. But in this case specifically, you have the language that you need for those trees, and it just needs to be pointed out for those specific trees, and I think you're there. So it's a good point for those oak trees that are overhanging, and it's important to look at where the excavation begins and ends, and what the no-go zone under those roots to avoid compaction. So that's a possibility from within what you have. So we can talk about that when we do some findings. We can add that too, so that you're not held up by that, but that it's still taken in.
Yeah, if there's language in the arborist report that we can refer to and then incorporate it into a condition in the resolution, I think that would be beneficial. Are there any other comments? Yes, Laura.
Hi, I have a question regarding the large tree that's going to be behind the proposed house. So I had a little bit of trouble with the arborist report because they number the trees, but I couldn't really tell, where the numbers were on a plan. But I'm presuming that tree 22 is the large tree that's behind the house. And my question is that what's your intended status for that tree?
We propose to remove tree 22 just because it's so close to the back of the house that during the excavation efforts to secure the foundation for the house, that tree would probably need to be removed just because its root structure and drip line would be heavily affected by the excavation on site. I also believe that noted within the arborist report that it said that that tree was suffering from a disease, and then so that there was potential for failure within the tree itself. And so we are proposing removing that tree just so that it won't be affected during the excavation. And even if it was to be able to withstand the excavation, there's worry that the tree would later on then fall onto the house that was built.
Okay, well, I think that's unfortunate that because it is a really nice specimen tree. I don't know, have you looked at maybe seeing if you could alter the design of the house slightly so that you could avoid, so you could avoid impact with the tree?
Could I just read what the arborist wrote about that tree? Because I think it might help or give you a starting point. He says there's good vigor, but there's significant decay in the large scaffold branches and the long lateral scaffold branches. So the tree has some problems.
What tree is that?
22.
22.
Tree 22.
I would ask Commissioner Lamont if she could comment on that.
This is one arborist report. It's a tough call with oak trees because this kind of root disturbance can take years to kill the tree, and so we keep it, and it's great for 5 years, and then it comes crashing down on the house. So it's a tough call. It is a magnificent tree, and when I pulled up to the site and saw where it was, my heart sank. And I think that that's some of the work of the tree committee to really look closely at that. Not to punt this, but I did look at the design of the house and considering, I guess what it means to us is, do we want legal parking, or do we want this amazing tree to stay there? And that's a balancing act that we have to come up with because it's an amazing tree. So yes, it's got some problem in scaffolding branches, but I think those are all kind of manageable. It doesn't have sudden oak death. It's obviously been around for a while. It's well adapted to the site and well supported by the rest of the grove there, which is something. So that's kind of my non-committal way of saying we need to decide. I mean, as a town, we need to decide, is parking more important sometimes than some of these trees? I mean, if that house came forward, you guys who live on the street, is it better to have to find parking really far away from your house because we've pushed these cars off this site? Or is it better to keep that tree and have those branches in that sky? And, you know, it's a tough call. It's a really tough call. So I'm not helping at all, I know.
No, that is helpful, thank you. I mean, I think the tree committee review will have something, you know, to add to that, so that's we have that issue. Go ahead.
I thought it was a very well articulated example of what we wrestle with on almost every single difficult project or trade-offs. We try and, especially in this town with these little teeny lots, we try and balance the property owner wanting a reasonable size house with the beautiful trees and landscape, with the parking needs of the neighbors, the aesthetic of our town. You know, let's squeeze it, but then it pops up high. It's like a whack-a-mole game. You know, you squeeze it thinner and then it pops up high, and then some people say that's too high, and then you move it back and we bump the tree and, oh, we can't do the tree, and then you move it forward and people say, oh, but what about parking? And it reminds me of that whack-a-mole game, and we try our best to balance all of those trade-offs. So I think you did an excellent job of articulating that. There's never a perfect answer. We try and do our best. Question the process-wise. This project does have a lot of trees on it to be considered, and what we've heard is that the report as it stands was based on looking at 5 trees, and now we've got extra trees that are being removed for crowding and other issues, and we've got neighboring trees that are considered that were not part of the original document. I know that it's going back to the tree committee, but as we used to have issues with the design committee, what if the tree committee comes back and says, no, we're not going to approve that removal? Then we've approved a project that can't be built because it's dependent upon that removal. Is there some provision that we might be able to have their first pass input before moving forward, so that if they say we're not going to approve this because of that, the applicants have a time to do something and come back to us without having to resubmit a new application? You see where I'm going with the process, kind of catch-22 thing here?
I do see where you're going with it, but I think you have to review the project in front of you, and your action can be appealed and the tree committee's actions can be appealed. So I think
I get that. I was trying to find a process where we don't have to go through a formal, if we continued it, could the tree committee, or I'm seeing a head not waving no.
Before you.
I have a question about fire truck access. If the residents do park on the street, are we going to reduce a 12-foot minimum width requirement? Is it 12 feet for the fire truck?
it's 12 feet, and if there wasn't 12 feet along their frontage, they would, and you required them to move the house closer to the street, they would be finding an area on the street in front of other neighbors' homes where there is 12 feet clearance, because they'll get tickets if they narrow the road below 12 feet.
So parking on the street would narrow the street, the access to less than 12?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the commissioners for the owner? My comment again is I'm just hoping those 2 garage spaces remain as spaces so that we don't have these issues with parking, because we'll hear about it if we do. Okay, now is the time for public comment on this property. Thank you to you, and Ryan, thank you very much. And anybody have neighbors or et cetera have any comments on the properties? And please limit yourself to 3 minutes. Yes? Yes? You just push that button and the red light goes on and then we can hear you. You see the button on the base there?
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Liz Harris. I'm the 160 Willow Avenue person. My husband and I have lived on that property for 34 years. We have a lot of vested interest in the town. I've served on a district advisory committee for the schools when my kids went to Ross Valley schools. My neighbor and I, Harry Carpenter, are responsible for launching the whole petition drive that got our stoplight and the other two for the town. So we do our best to contribute to the town. But as I hope, did you have a chance to read my letter? Obviously you did. Okay. So I'm just going to hit some of the issues that have already been talked about. As far as the fence line discrepancy, no one has ever said the applicant, nobody said anything to us about our fence being on their property. So that's all new to me. And, you know, as far as the arborist not able to reach us, I don't know why he wasn't able to. Also, you can see our oak trees, right? I mean, it's a clear fence, so he could have, anyway, he can see the trees without even trespassing on our property. But I also wondered, since the applicant said if you were going to put additional conditions on the approval, that he'd want, you know, I think you said to postpone it or continue it, why that couldn't be a way to address maybe the tree issues and everything else, since he just said that they would be willing to continue it if conditions were going to be placed, and maybe that would solve your problem there. Okay, I'll just really quickly say then that our basic contention is that the house, yes, it might be a 1,000 square foot house, but you only have an 80-foot wide lot. It's a very old lot. Most of the houses on the street are multiple lots, parcels that have been put together. This one isn't. We think the house is oversized for the lot, that it should be smaller. I know that Linda mentioned that there are many houses on, or, you know, there are a lot of crowded houses on Willow, basically, and I don't think that's the case. I think down at the bottom of the street, there are a lot of compact houses right next to each other, but as you go up the street, that's not the case. Also, as far as the variances, they cited the house that's at the corner. I think that's 176 Willow, which anyone can see. Neighbors were not happy when that house went in. It's too big for the lot. It's crowding. And I don't think that just because, you know, exceptions were made for certain houses, that that should be a precedent for giving an exception to this house. As we mentioned, we feel that the 11-foot tall retaining walls are too high, and even the report said it's the minimum that would keep it safe, so I'm wondering if minimum is really enough. Maybe you're creating an unsafe condition by, you know, maybe that's not enough. Not that I want higher walls, but maybe the configuration just isn't a good configuration. What else? And yes, they're only asking for 2 feet in terms of a variance for the side, but if the house was next to your property, and that 2 feet would mean a lot to you. It would mean a lot to me, the difference between 8 feet and 10 feet, and now that I'm learning that they're contending that actually, you know, our fence is on their property, so that makes it seem even closer. But I feel that the house, yeah, they should be building a small house on that property, and maybe it should be narrower than, you know, so that they can comply with the rules that the town has set up. I mean, rules are rules, and if you keep making an exception for this house and this condition and that condition, then you don't have any rules. And, you know, so we feel that you should stick to the rules and not make the exception, and if their house has to be 2 feet narrower, so be it. It's a very skinny lot. Yeah, we are concerned about our 2 oaks and, you know, how it would impact them. And we don't want the oaks falling on our property, obviously. The one heritage oak that you're talking about, tree number 22, is a gorgeous, big, I mean, it's one of the nicest trees in the neighborhood. And, you know, it'd be a real shame. Yeah, I mean, the guy said, yes, it has vigor, and there are two limbs that, you know, may be stressed. Okay, so you trim back the two limbs that are stressed. But I don't know. Obviously, the house is so close that it would impact the roots of that tree. I think that's all I'll go into. Since you have read the letter, my husband was going to talk a little bit further about the fencing, because that's a major kind of issue to us that took us totally by surprise. And like I said, no one has approached us to say anything about that. That's why I was really concerned when the story poles went up. And I think that that's it. That's it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Victor Harris. And I think that the group here tonight has asked a lot of good questions. This is a project that shouldn't be built or that should be restructured. Most importantly, I can't cover all the questions that are raised by the report in the short period of time that I have. But on page 2, it's the proposed side setback that my wife brought up, that Linda addressed. No one came to us and said, hey, we're going to change the map. And in fact, that's what the report reflects. They changed the map. Now, how does that happen? Unfortunately, I'm a lawyer, so I know a little bit about this. And the way this has happened doesn't work. We've been there, even assuming that that the original measurement of the lot was incorrect, and somehow miraculously, because we're now in the 21st century, it changed, which I don't understand how. We've been occupying that couple of feet of the property, fenced in, open and notoriously, for the 34 years we've been here, and it was always there when we bought the property. And as a result, the settled law is that we obtain title to that property by virtue of adverse possession. So it can't just be changed by a magic wand. And now I want to move on beyond the law. The report says that, and Linda was right, it said more than 100 feet. More than 1,000, more than, what was it, Linda? More than 100?
The cubic yard, the number of cubic yards?
Number of cubic yards, more than 100.
Right.
But in fact, it's really 355. Now, my main question is, in light of that almost fourfold increase, what does that do to those retaining walls? Does that mean you have to have, it's already twice the town limit, does it mean you have to have a bigger one? It doesn't mean you have to have a bigger one. And you've been working on, so the 11-foot still works, okay. And we know you've been working well on trying to get something specific where it's not in the Planning Commission report as to what mitigation can be for that retaining wall. So that was those were the main points that I had, except that what about undermining our oak trees and the landslide that's going to happen under us? I mean, one of the reasons that the report has a provision in it that protects the town from responsibility by the owner, maybe you do it in all reports. But if you do it in all reports, okay. But to me, it highlights the concern. This is really a case where it's too big of a house to be slammed into a small area and change the flavor of Fairfax. Exceptions can't become the rule. And so I would respectfully request that the proposal be either continued to mitigate the problems that we've all noticed tonight, or that it be, unfortunately, say, go back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I do wonder about the neighboring oaks and how they might be impacted. Right, okay. Next, public comment.
Hi. This is B.B. Newton. I'm the chair of the Fairfax Open Space Committee. And I wanted to just first express my gratitude to staff for allowing us to get our little ad hoc subcommittee together and review the proposal. You know, I think the idea of having the Open Space Committee review undeveloped properties that are of significance to us is a great thing that the general plan requires. And I'm sorry that there was a little mix-up with respect to this first one that we've had the opportunity to look at, but we really did try to accommodate planning, and so there were a lot of questions that we had, and so in addition, I also appreciate the answers to the questions we raised. I don't want to repeat all the stuff that we put in the report. I just want to give you guys a little background on why we identified this property. Initially, when I first saw it, it was brought to my attention, you know, it's got an incredible madrone grove at the top, and obviously the oak that you saw is just a really beautiful tree, and that was what first drew me there. Over the years, when I've been working on the Open Space Committee, I've always, as I go up Willow, see deer on that piece of property, and I know because of the nature of the neighborhood, how built out it is, and that being one of the few undeveloped properties left in that neighborhood, that it's important for that reason too, because of the potential wildlife corridor that it provides, things like that, and you know, just sort of for the ambience of the neighborhood to have some large trees, I think is important to the neighbors. And I did hear from some people that there was some interest in trying to acquire the property from the owner and try and preserve it, but I think, you know, I just want to focus on the proposal that was before us, and that was, you know, our focus for this, as opposed to grand ideas about swooping in and buying it and saving it. Just to update you, I did also get information since I filed that report that tree 22 is actually 47 inches as opposed to the 38 that it's identified in the arborist report. So that raises questions in my mind about the accuracy of the arborist report. And I want to point out that under our own tree ordinance, 25 inches constitutes the heritage oak. So I think regardless of whether it's 38 or 47, it's clearly a heritage oak. And I really agree with Shelley about, you know, how does this relationship between planning's approval of a proposal to build a home jive with the tree committee's responsibility to review and ensure that trees are not removed in violation of our tree ordinance. And so I guess that's my question for you guys. You know, to what extent does your approval of a building permit put sort of pressure on the members of the tree committee to approve removal of a tree? You know, it just seems to me that they should be independently considered potentially. At the same time, you know, I think if you guys saw a way to have this single-family home develop that did require this tree to be removed because of how valuable it is to the town, like by definition, I think, you know, I'd ask you to think about that. Obviously, with the little time you guys have, the fact that you got to act today, I don't know how realistic that is. And I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask me any questions. So if you have any.
Thanks, Mimi. I appreciate your time on this. Do you know if specifically on this property there's ever been any sort of observational data collection on the use of the property as a wildlife corridor? I mean, anecdotally we know about deer, but if there's anything else that's been documented there, ephemeral plants blooming, or any sort of kind of inventory that, because it's on the open space list, if anybody's been able to kind of document, besides the Madrone Grove, anything else that would strengthen that?
Without the benefit of our own on-staff biologist, we have not done that, and so we didn't really have the time to pull that kind of a review together. There's a lot of properties on our inventory, and I think we've done that for one. We've had birders come to one. We haven't even done the full-scale plant analysis or other things. You know, so all I know is the anecdotal information that we provided in the report of wildlife spottings by neighbors that we did have the opportunity to speak with. Okay.
How far back from the, what is it, 47-inch oak would the house have to be located to preserve the oak? I don't know if you can answer that.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm not an arborist.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I wish I was an arborist. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on 164 Willow Avenue?
Thanks for letting me speak. My name is James Whittlesey. I live at 168 Willow Avenue, which is in the downstairs duplex adjacent to the property. I had one thing they were asking about the fauna. The property is right outside my living room window, and I can attest to that there are 6 deer that regularly habitate that area, and a family of 4 raccoons that live in that tree there. So there is quite a bit of fauna there. One thing the first I'd heard there's meeting in construction, the contractor came by and he originally said that the house was going to be below our house. And in fact, now that with the story poles up, I can distribute a photograph if you'd like, but the back of the house actually comes now halfway, approximates halfway up if you go out our living room stairs, it goes halfway across, not right there in that spot, but equivalent to that. So therefore, looking right outside our living room window, there's the house.
If we could see the photograph, if you could give it to the secretary here, and she'll. Okay. Okay, thank you. Just so we, can visually see. Right. Couldn't see it from where you were standing.
Right. So that's my main concern is that, obviously people, with the property, people not to go on a piece of property, but because
okay, you need to please back to the microphone so we can hear you on the record, so to speak.
Oh, right. Well, anyway, so that was my main concern, that I feel that the house is too far back, and because it does impede the view of the house. And I was planning on putting some tarps over the story poles so you could actually see what it would look like if there was actually a house there. And if you add the actual wall there where the house is, it would actually make the area quite a bit darker. And then I'm also concerned about what if all of a sudden they want to put a fence up. And if that fence went right along the property line, standard 6-foot high fence going up the hill, then it's even darker in there. Our house as it is very dark, and that's our main living room where we spend quite a bit of time. Another concern is I didn't know if there's an air conditioner being installed. I couldn't see in the plans if there's an air conditioner. I didn't see if there was one, because if there is an air conditioner, then it should not be near our house. So those are the main things I'm concerned about in the house, in the construction. and I do feel it'd have a big impact. I've always felt that I don't know how anyone could build it. And the other comment they had made earlier about the setbacks and no setbacks, saying, oh, they're usually have, most of the houses in the areas have a greater setback or than that, those or a lesser setback. Those are the houses at the bottom of the hill where there's a series of duplexes going up the hill where the houses are quite close to each other. In our area, they aren't, except for the house that's next to us with 174. When they originally built it, for some reason, they did not put a setback because that house is only about 15 feet from the wall of our house. So on one side, there's a house that's about 15 feet away, and then you're going to put a house on the other side of there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other comments on 164 Willow?
Hi, my name is Sandra Cornell, and I live at 169 Willow, so I live across the street right here. So at least the house is kind of tilted. It's not full on right in front of my...
We can't,
I'm sorry.
okay,
I'm sorry.
thank you. So,
I live right across the road in the little blue cottage, and the street is a one in, one out, and I'm worried about the pedestrians, the kids, everybody. If they're going to excavate so much earth, how are they going to move all of it? And how is the road going to support all of that? And the kids coming back from school, it's like on kind of a blind corner, not really blind, but not really good visibility. So I'm kind of worried about that, and the dust and the dirt, of course. It is a beautiful lot. I really love looking at it, and there's fungi that cascade down after rains, and the oaks, of course, are beautiful, and the moon comes up. But anyway, I don't understand why we can't figure out what we're going to do with the pieces of property before people have a dream to build a house and get their expectations up and go through this huge process and then have to meet all of this, neighbor stuff and all I don't know, it's difficult. I'm also wondering about the stairs, like that staircase, how long is that? Because that is what I would see when I walk out my front door, is that staircase. And it looks kind of cementy to me, but I mean, things can be softened up with plants and stuff. What else? That's about it for me. I'm just, the construction, the trucks, the contractors in and out, it's a little road. That's it for me.
okay, thank you very much. And another comment, thank you.
Yes, my name is Ruth Horn. I live at 11 Upper Ridgeway, and I can see the oak trees on this lot, and they are just an incredible canopy and such a wonderful thing to look at. And I know other neighbors who I don't think are here tonight have mentioned the same thing. And to see a house instead of the oak trees, well, I'm glad you are taking good care to preserve the oak trees, and maybe with a little help, they would even grow better. I know I had one tree, it was a small one, and the arborist just cut out the part that was wrong at the back. He said he'd learned this from somebody, and it is doing well. It got rid of that, whatever was bothering it. I've talked to a lot of the neighbors. I did talk to the owners of the duplex last night. Thank goodness that report was there, because that's the only way I could talk to them. And their attorney called the owner, and he called me. So it was the first time. I had met his mother, who is now in a nursing home, and the two sons are taking care of this. And I think there was a little intimidation going on, and that's why that letter was written by the attorney. And it seems to be the same thing that Liz and her husband are talking about the encroachment, whatever. And anyway, they are concerned about the property. So I want to include things I lived through the summer of 2003 and into 2004 with the construction of the property uphill, which the neighbors are calling the monster home because it is kind of non-conforming with the other little houses that are there. And I would argue that the variances, let's stick to the rules and guard the oak trees, get some more reports, make sure they are incorporated. Willow is a narrow street. It's sometimes very difficult to get down it. And guard the street, and there's not much parking. Linda said that in this case, many times the contractor would carpool his workers up there. And the wear and tear on the road is important to guard. And the restricted parking, I already talked about that. We've had blockages by a fire truck. I couldn't get out of my street for a kitchen fire 2 doors in on Chester. And they took care of it pretty fast. It wasn't a big fire, but I could not get out of my driveway. And all the backup vehicles. And sometimes this does happen there. And workers forget to put up signs, so it's hard to get down Willow, even for the postman, if you're passing him. And the utility shutoffs. Sometimes we're not informed of utility shutoffs. And suddenly you're trying to have breakfast and have to go to work, and you don't have any hot water or electricity. So we already have one house in the neighborhood that's kind of the monster house, known as the Monster House, and really glares down on Chester Avenue. It was built in 2003. They began the excavation then, and it was a very long, difficult summer. 8 to 6. I think it was 6 days a week. Maybe they took one off, and I found out that they can even work on Sundays and holidays for excavation. And we had earthquakes then, too, as they pounded in the steel. So these are some of the things that I thought about. I've talked with the neighbors, and many of them are here today. We did what we could to cover the neighborhood and get to know each other, and that was a very nice experience. So thank you for considering this project so carefully.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Richard Holland, the owner of 176 Willow, the Monster House. I'm also a real estate broker, and whereas I don't have an issue really with a house being built on the lot, I would like to refer to the resolution you have before you and that you're going to be voting on here momentarily. And I think as you've heard from the neighbors in point 14, it says the requested 2-foot variance from the required 20-foot combined side setback is similar to variances previously granted to other property owners, which would be my property. But I was not involved at all with the construction of that property. It says will not have a significant impact on immediate neighbors, but I think you've heard at least from the 2 adjacent neighbors that it will, and I think because of the construction of the house where I currently reside, there's experience in what will be required for the retaining walls and what will go into it. And so as you consider the vote whether or not to approve the current plan, and it is a well-documented, I appreciate all the work that went into this, but at the end where it says the construction of the residence can occur without causing significant impacts on neighboring residences and the environment, I think that the neighbors would not agree that the plan as stipulated will not be considerable, will not have considerable consequences because it is such a narrow lot. And I think there are ways to mitigate the circumstance, but I think it might behoove us all to kind of go back and take a look and what would fit better on the property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And we have yet another comment from a neighbor.
Hi, I'm Helen Strodel. I live at 95 Chester. I've lived there for 35 years. I have a huge problem with an 11-foot retaining wall. I understand that's what's necessary in order to build the proposed house with the given dimensions. Maybe a smaller house, I don't know. Is it the right use of this tiny little piece of property to make all of these adjustments for this tiny house? I don't know. I appreciate your comment about would they really use the garage for parking their cars, because there's a huge problem with parking in the area. There really isn't very much street parking at all, and if more cars get added, it will be a problem. And the construction, obviously, if they're going to build something on this property, there's going to be construction. I understand that. But are vehicles going to be left on the street overnight? That's problems for parking and problems for the neighbors. When will they start work? When will they end work? Will they work on Sundays? I personally, obviously, as you're listening to me, can tell that I would rather not see any house built on the property. I understand that the people who own it have the right to do something with the property, but I just don't want to make too many exceptions on their behalf that will impact the rest of the neighborhood negatively. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other public comments, then I would like to throw this project to the commissioners for discussion.
Wow. I appreciate everybody coming and engaging in the public process because this helps our job in incorporating the concerns of the neighborhood while this is taking place. Some of my points are sort of rhetorical in nature and maybe in an educational basis, and others are up for discussion. I agree with both the commissioners and a lot of the public in softening the retaining wall facade with textures and planting materials and things that we've heard a lot of. Much of Fairfax is surrounded by nature and open space, and we want to preserve that, whether it's in downtown districts and sort of up the hillsides. There is the concern of, gee, this has been a nice open lot for people to enjoy and nature to enjoy, but it is zoned in an area for residential development, and the concern is, as communities, we balance individual rights with the greater good of the community. I'm a planner by training, so when I go to buy a house, I'm the one who's always pulling town plans and transportation plans because I want to know if there's plans for a highway to come in and what that empty lot can be used for. So it is, I appreciate the concern that there's been deer and there's birds and there's wildlife that are enjoying a lot, but it's still a lot that's legally zoned for housing, and the owner does have the right to build the housing within the conditions set by the town. The Planning Commission, we're not a law-making body. That's our town council. We can't make laws. We enforce and work with the laws that the state and the town have in place. With regard to variances, variances are granted when there's a hardship that often runs with the land that makes development for that particular parcel problematic. So there's a large oak tree that can't be removed right in the middle of the property. It gives the Planning Commission the jurisdiction to say, okay, you can push back your property line to a setback that maybe your neighbors don't have, to allow the fact that you have to make a donut-shaped house around this oak tree that can't be cut down. And this is one of those lands it's tight. So there's the setback concern that I'm hearing from a lot of the neighbors, this 20-foot versus 18-foot setback. So something that we can discuss up here. There is the concern that I've had that do our zoning laws, which again, we can't change here, but does the zoning reflect what we want in a community. And we do grant variances, and there is concerns with additional parking and some of the practices that I hear what the neighbors are saying. Is it sustainable that we have some of the problems in the downtown where neighbors now take a one-bedroom cottage and make a two-story, three-bedroom house, and now there's not enough street parking and they're parking in setbacks. So I think it's a concern that we have as we look at the general plan and take things to town council. So landowner rights, and we try to balance out the externalities to communities. We have zoning ordinances and tree ordinances and noise ordinances to try to protect the general public. I can't get out with my leaf blower at 2 a.m. and clear my lawn because that does a disservice to everybody else. So we have to fit within that. So we have to balance the landowner's rights so again can go ahead and build on here. The concern in terms of construction, I know the Willow neighborhood very well, and so I hear the concerns of the tight streets and getting the trucks and the vehicles in there in a safe way, and we usually have that language when we approve these to make sure to minimize that. There's always reasonability if we want to shorten the days of construction or time windows if there's a need to do that. If it's a shorter work day, then the project may take 9 months instead of 6 months to finish. So it's kind of balancing that length of time that the construction is going to be there versus longer days. So that's something to discuss and to work that out with staff as well. In terms of the oak trees, again, it's back to nature versus the right of the landowners. It's a hard one. We have tree ordinances and an open space committee that has to address those so we can work within the confines, but we still have a property owner that has a residential land use in which they want to build a house that pretty much falls in compliance with town codes.
Okay. I think that it's important for us to maintain the feel of the town and the trees, and we do actually consider all the neighbors' views here. So we're going to, talk about the project. I must say, though, that in some of the comments I heard, some people were thinking the house could be smaller. It is about a 1,400 square foot house, and if you look at the plans, it's fairly compactly built, planned as it is. But some of the issues that have been brought up here, one of my comments here is about the 11-foot walls. It would be nice to have a condition that may not be too onerous on the owner, that they may need to continue the project for it, but still have a reasonable condition about articulation and plantings. Those are my comments. Yes.
I have a question of staff. I guess it would be, is it considered the guest parking spot, what they've shown that's in the driveway apron? Is that allowed to be, that's allowed to be like more parallel to the street? Is that correct? It doesn't necessarily have to be in the
No, it
position
actually,
that it shows.
it can only be in tandem with one of the spaces for the main house. So you'll see on a couple of the sheets, they originally showed it at an angle blocking both the garage spaces. That's not legal. So it's shown correctly on page A21. It can only be in tandem with one of the spaces for the main house.
But I guess my question is, could we allow that to be changed so that we could then perhaps shift the house closer to the street, and it could maybe...
Yeah, you could ask the applicant to mutually agree with the commission to continue the project for 90 days. Both groups have to agree so that you don't violate the Permit Streamlining Act, and you could direct them, if it seemed like a majority of you might be agreeable to that, to apply for a parking variance to have the space in tandem with both the spaces of the main house. Basically, you'd be continuing it, telling them your concerns and asking them to entertain a redesign. and apply for the required discretionary permits for that redesign. And then we'd have to notice it that way. When we notice it, we have to list the different types of discretionary permits that are being requested. But if they agreed to that, you could do that but only for 90 days. So that means people really have to get in gear, and they have to get their drawings together and apply for the right permits, because once 90 days comes, you have to act.
Okay. Because as it stands now, I mean, I think I'm okay with the size of the house, the design of the house, but my issue is I'd like to see if, you know, the tree is the big deal for me. So it seems like it might be possible to move the house closer to the street, and that might also then mitigate the retaining wall issue. You could lower the retaining wall, and then, you know, maybe the retaining wall would be more like on a flare. And so anyway, that's what I'm thinking right now.
Okay. I'm really struggling with this this project. I think because of the tree and the neighbors' concerns. All the comments I think are valid. I do think this is a very well-designed home. I think it is pretty compact. I was looking at the floor plan. I think maybe the living area is 15 feet wide. An average sofa nowadays is like 7 foot long. You know, you kind of put it in proportion. It's really not that big. It's just that the size of the lot is very narrow. In the vein of what Laura was saying, you know, pushing it away from the oak, I'm wondering if you can push it up the site and have a longer, a more gradual grade, a grade change, like a long driveway that is gradual. You would have a longer retaining wall, but it would be lower, and the house would actually be offset from the houses. This just, you know, just a thought, a consideration, kind of going opposite of what we've been talking about, because I really think the parking is important, and I appreciate how much work has gone into this project. I know what it takes to get to this point, and you know, I commend you for that. I think it is a great design, but I hear the encroachment into the Harrises has not been addressed. The 2 oak trees, we don't know their future. And we haven't really seen how the retaining walls are going to be softened or dealt with. But that tree, if, you know, there is any way to address it or mitigate it, you know, I'm just really sad to see that tree go. It's, you know, it's almost 4 feet in girth. That's almost as tall as me. You know, that's pretty big. It's very majestic. So I think, you know, rather than, you know, I personally would favor a continuance, just because I think there are still too many questions to be answered. Like I said, that almost if you can relocate that design and make it work with the site so that it's not in the way of the neighbors, and you have a gradual slope. I know it's a lot more expensive to run utilities up a hill, but you may actually get your house built. So those are my thoughts.
So I've got a lot of questions. One of the things that I am reflecting on is that often what I find in this process, and I'm hearing it again tonight, that unfortunately this process is often the first time various parties in the neighborhood start talking. Unfortunately, it's not the last time, or it's not the only, you know, that it's maybe the only time as opposed to 3/4 of the way down the process. We have had, I feel, one of the times that I feel the best leaving this room is when we've orchestrated a process where challenging issues between neighbors come before us, and I leave the room finding people talking to each other that had never talked to each other before in a way, and helping to resolve their problems. And sometimes it's been around whether or not we have glazing on a window or the window moves. And they hadn't talked about it beforehand, and here we are talking about it, and we say, you go figure out what's better. You want to move the window? You want to glaze the window? Because ultimately you both agree on the underlying value or principle behind it. It's just how you achieve that could be one way or the other. I don't believe, and I rarely ever see property owners who like, cut down the trees, forget the neighbors, we don't like the property, forget the raccoons. So there's a shared value I often see among all participants who come into this room. And where the rub hits is how you work through those values, work through the application of those values in a site. Taller, bigger, here, there, glazed, clear, this way, that way. But when participants can have our input and work together to recognize that they have shared values to steward the land and figure out the best way to do that collectively, I love to see that, and I feel really good that we've done something and that what we end up with. So I'm feeling nervous about the lot line conversation that still seems to be in process. The question of whether the map is changed or that there was a discovery of new information that nobody ever needed to know before, and now we have a new circumstance that we need to know, and we find out things, we, neighbors, property owner, town council, planning commission, find out new information. And that new information we have to deal with somehow because it's not familiar to us. And there is an issue I wrote down, and later tonight I would love if people would like to stay for our general conversation. We have a laundry list of things, as one of us talked about, that we don't make the laws. We propose new laws and we interpret them and apply them. But we also realize we see patterns of bumps in those laws. And we have a list later on tonight where we say, listen, we've seen lots and lots of bumps with hillside development, with the height issues, with the parking issues. And we'd like to see some work on that in terms of how the laws are set. So I'm imagining that when architects look at this little teeny narrow thing and they look at our height ordinance, they may have considered, well, let's make it a little bit taller so nobody wants to come up here for a variance, believe me. That's not what people want to do. They want to make it, and they look at all the variances that they might have to do. They might consider a parking. Do we go for a parking variance, or do we go for 2 feet on a side setback variance? Do we go for a height variance, or do we go for a lot line variance? And that's what the architects do with a site when they're trying to make it work. So where am I going with all of this? I'm going with the parking thing. I'm wondering whether the tandem issue might bring, if you look at what we're looking at approving. So I went through and I counted, okay, what is it that we're approving? We are approving a hill area residential development permit. That's what has to do with the cubic yards of material. The proposal hasn't changed from 100 to 200 or 300, whatever. It's always been 300. It's the 100 that triggers us to have to do the HRD permit. So there's nothing different in here in terms of they're excavating more than they said. They always said it was 300 and something. That's what the retaining wall was built for. There's nothing that's changed with that. So that's one thing that we have to approve tonight. There's only 5 things really. So that's the first one. The second one is the design review approval. I haven't heard anything in the audience. I haven't heard anything up here that we think it's a horrific eyesore. It's the height and the mass and those things. The third thing is the excavation permit. Again, that's related to the first one and the height and the issue with mainly with the retaining wall. So we've talked about that, and can we mitigate it? Can we step it back?
if you step it back, you're actually excavating more. So you've got, again, these trade-offs, the height of the wall versus the stepping back and the excavation. And then 4 and 5 are the variances. And I heard people say a lot tonight, stick to the rules. So the first two, the HRD permit and the design review and the excavation permit, are not rules. They're permits that you have to get. They're not like you're violating a rule. They're just saying, in order to move forward, you need a permit in these areas because you've done something that's triggered them. The two exceptions, if you will, are the variances. Those variances are the wall height variance for the retaining wall, thank you, and the yard setbacks. So if the house had 2 feet more combined yard setback and the wall was 6 feet, we wouldn't be seeing those exceptions before us. We would still have the HRD permit and the design review and the excavation permit. So I'm hearing us talking about the wall height, and is there something that we can do with the wall height? Now the trees have to do with the HRD permit, which is the Hill Area Residential Development Permit, because that is there because of things like natural conditions and slope and that the natural conditions of the site. So that's where the trees play into it. That's where the site of the building plays into it. I do think the trees are a consideration. I would be open to looking at moving the parking, angling it maybe, or something like that. We've heard move it forward, we've heard move it backward. I am wrestling with approving something with trees that are different sizes, there's different numbers. I'm tending towards a continuance both because of the questions that I have and because of what I feel that it would allow in a process for the neighbors to engage possibly with each other and have a better understanding of the lot lines and come to what I've seen in the past is when they've had the time and the space to communicate, we end up with a better process. So I'm hearing an openness from the applicant to do that. I'm hearing concern from the neighbors, but not sometimes the kind of anger and, that sometimes we do hear from neighbors. So I'm hearing goodwill and I'm hearing possibility, and I would like to give the process time to do that because I think it can work out really well.
Mr. Chair, if I can weigh in for a moment on the lot line issue.
Yes, please do.
Part of the application was the requirement to submit a survey of record. And the surveyor goes out, finds these control points, and plots the lot. Lot line disputes are not uncommon, particularly in antiquated subdivisions like this. And this may come to surprise some people, but it was my education on the Planning Commission for Sausalito when we had just a similar lot line dispute. And one neighbor that was the applicant came in with a survey, and there was a dispute whether the lot line between them was accurate or not. So the adjoining neighbor went out and got another survey. And lo and behold, that survey showed the lot line in another location. So what happens under that circumstances? 2 surveys of record, different locations on where that line is. You won't decide. A judge decides. We have no way at that point to determine it. But what you have before you now is a survey of record. And it would be incumbent upon the neighbors, if they want to dispute that, to go get another survey and articulate how the existing survey of record in this application is either inaccurate or how coming from 2 different directions with 2 different control points, there's a discrepancy. And then again, it would be up to the neighbors to either work it out or go to court on a civil matter, and the judge would determine where that lot line is. So that's this disposition of a lot line dispute between the 2 parcels. I hear you moving towards a continuance, but I would just also weigh in on the retaining wall that seems to be an issue. If you do go in the direction of wanting some facade improvements to lessen the impact of that wall, and I was struck when the applicant's representative said they were thinking and adding that. Unfortunately, it's not part of your package tonight, so that's a missing piece of the design review. So you have a couple of choices. That could be one basis for continuing this also, to get the complete effects that might be incorporated into mitigating that face of the wall, and or you could leave it to staff's opinion on different measures. You could just, in a cursory level, point out a performance, what you want to have accomplished, and then without a prescriptive approach, leave it to staff. That's your call. And then lastly, there's been a lot of comments, and understandably so, on the impacts from a construction like this. And as you all know, there's a normal road bond that gets deposited for any damage to the road. And you all, in the past, because we have several narrow roadways and our antiquated subdivisions, you, in your wisdom, have required a construction plan. And that actually talks about, that would include, staging on where cars would park, how many cars would come up there, how long they would stay, and things like clear aisleways, making sure the fire apparatus can get in and whatnot. So that's been an approach in other difficult areas. And that's my comments for now.
I do have a question on the encroachment issue. If the survey of record shows to be the one and only survey that takes place, and there is an agreement between the two neighbors, is that an agreement that runs with the owners or runs with the land? So if the existing landowner decides to sell and a new owner takes that property and there's an existing encroachment that's in place?
I think that's a legal question, and I'm hesitant to answer, but I think it depends on the agreement between the owners. I think if it's an easement of record, it goes with the land.
Yeah, if it's of record, it will go with the land.
I forgot our chair's a lawyer.
If I may make a comment at this point about this encroachment, neighbors can get together. It's a fence. I was going to say it's just a fence. No, it is a fence issue. Mistakes are made. It's whether or not you would want to get into potentially years of litigation, a year more, and possibly appeals over this issue of, I don't know what it is, 2 or 3 feet, or come to an agreement together, to echo Shelley's comment that neighbors can make such agreements.
It might be a very simple exercise, because the neighbor that is surprised to find that their fence is not on, allegedly not on their property, they have another property line, and measuring the width of their parcel can very easily sort of be a quick reference point. I'm just saying, yeah, if they know where that property line is. But depending on when houses are built, you can go off the most recent records of survey also.
I had a couple other just technical questions which have to do with the width and the setbacks. The setbacks are measured, how does the stairways up the left side of the house, is that where the setback starts from, or is it just from the house? And how do the setbacks play into the retaining wall if you step it closer, if you step it closer to the property line to make it lower? Could you just tell me a little bit about structure versus stairs and retaining wall with setbacks?
Okay. It depends. We measure the setback to the stairs sometimes. If it's a raised, constructed wooden stairway that's above grade with a fixed place on the ground, it'll be counted as part of a structure. If it's concrete almost on grade, it's not really considered poured on grade and stepped up the hill, it's not considered a structure. And so in this case, we're measuring to the wall of the house. The stairway isn't included as in the, the stairway can encroach into the setback because it's not considered a structure.
If I may, one thing comes to mind with what you said. If you bring the structure forward, you've got that run of stairs that has to be that length based on the height. I was struck that the applicant's design team mentioned that the height of the garage is high enough so that you could have some storage, you might be able to lower the plate height of the garage, which lessens the length of the run for the stairs, so as you pull the house forward, the stairs still fit. Are you with me? Because they come right up to the property edge, rather than, I guess the alternative, depending on how the road is, request an encroachment for the stairways, which isn't desirable. Anyway, so, but there, it sounds like there might be some wiggle room with the parking in the front on the apron, and that, of course, dovetails with the big heritage tree issue in the back. There are sometimes within just a feet or two from the root structures, and help me out here, Shelby, it can make a big difference with the way you construct the foundation. So there might be a sort of a win-win here, I'm hearing, in terms of sort of the design as it is, and that heritage oak, which everybody loves, there might be a compromise without going back to a full redesign of the structure.
Any other?
Yeah. You just hit all my points. I think what's important to understand also in leaning toward continuance is to really have maybe a second opinion on the oak tree, to see if those few feet are going to make a difference for the tree. Because this may be the tail wagging the dog. And if we can give it 4 feet, does that help? If we give it 2 feet, does that help? Nobody can truly answer it, but we may have an arborist say, it doesn't make any difference at all. In which case, you know, that kind of changes the calculus a little bit. Also, there is a 14-foot difference between the floor of the garage and the floor of the ground floor. So it seems as though, guest parking aside, there's a lot of room to bring this down and forward, but we would have to grant a parking variance for that one guest space. But in doing that, we reduce the size of the walls, we reduce the run of the stairs, we get the building further away from the tree, we reduce the impact from views and windows from the neighbors. I mean, we're hitting all of these things that are you know, sensitive hot wires for that one parking space. And I personally value that tree so much more than I value whatever guest has a car there. Or, you know, I mean, I don't know if we can put a condition on the fact that they have to park in the garage, but, you know, maybe we need to explore the signage on the street to make that strict and no parking on the street and address it that way. But I think we have to start by knowing that we can save the tree. Because if we can't, no matter what happens, even if they park, you know, even if they have no driveway and they park right, you know, they park the house right on the property line, and that still doesn't save the tree, then it's a different conversation. So I'm leaning toward continuance so that we can answer that question especially. And then if that's answered properly, my question to staff is, okay, we can save the tree by moving it forward and cantilevering the foundation over the root zone and using a helical pier, just like one perforation in the root zone. And there are very, very graceful ways of floating a foundation over the roots of a tree. Do they have time to figure that out? Because we're going to need to hear that the tree, or you guys are going to need to hear that the tree can be saved. And then what does that mean for moving the house and granting the variance and all that? So there's kind of a timing issue, and we need more answers. But is there time to get the answers in order for us to rule on it? And I know that they can agree to the waiving their rights for that, but it's just for those 90 days. Or can they continue to waive their rights until we get this right? No, it's just the 90 days. Yeah. So it's
the actual construction details of the foundation. If the arborist came back and said the tree is savable, you don't have to have the exact foundation design. That could happen at the building permit stage.
I mean, I think they can get a second arborist report pretty quickly, and that'll let them know whether they should start working on some preliminary revised drawings to pull the house closer to the street.
And you could ask that
So
same
I think
arborist.
they can do it. They can't sit back and, you know.
And the
back on
arborist
their
could
laurels.
perhaps look at the other neighbor's tree roots at the same time.
Can I?
Yes, Shelley.
So I want to stop for a public service announcement for everyone who's out there listening, because this is a hot topic and I'm imagining there may be other people out. We need another person up here on the Planning Commission who's an engineer. We lost a soils engineer. We're losing a landscape engineer. When Shelby talks like she just talked right now about helical blah blah blahs, I know that she knows what she's doing, and I trust her, and we need someone. So I'm just saying, please, if you're out there and you want to be helpful, let us know.
Not that I don't like trees, because I do. My husband wants to take one down, and I said no. Parking versus trees. We don't have enough parking. I know Willow. we don't have enough parking. I'm okay not continuing. I'm okay with the application as is, with conditions put forth to soften the retaining wall, to staff's discretion, and to mitigate as much as we can in terms of the landscaping and the trees, and to trust the tree committee, because it still has to go there, to put in any recommendations. So.
Any more comments from the commission? I want to ask Laura, did you mention that you would be in favor of continuing to see if we can save the tree or not?
Yes, at this point, I would want to, I couldn't approve the application as it is. I value, the owner's right to be able to build the house, but the tree is a major issue for me, and I would want to see that we could do everything we could to try to save the tree.
In addition to that one tree, the issue of the neighbor's tree was brought up, and the issue of there being multiple trees that were going to be removed in other places because of, I don't have the terminology here, but because of crowding and some other stuff, and we don't have information. I don't know that we have, do we have all the, I didn't see all the full information or discussion. So there's that tree, and then I think we can get more information about the neighbor's trees as well. So as far as direction, I'm just adding direction to, and then we also did talk about construction plans, parking options. I think there's a possibility here. So when we talk about a parking variance, we're not necessarily taking away a parking space, we're just scooching it this way or that way. And one of the things that we've had on our agenda for bleep knows how many years is tandem parking. It doesn't take away a space, it changes the way you park 3 cars. We've all said, that's a good idea, and it's not happened yet. If that were appropriate, we probably would not have one of these variances, possibly. So we're not talking about taking away the 3rd spot. We're talking about angling it or shifting it. It leaves it there. So I think we need to let people know that we can do that. i.e. I'm headed towards continuance.
Okay. Any further comments from the commission? Okay. Well, what I'm hearing is, let me start out by saying to the applicant again that the house is a basically brilliant design, and before coming and hearing the public comment tonight, I had thought, it was kind of an amazing 1,400 square foot house. After comment, I would like to see more evidence about what the Harrises said about the impact on their trees. I think we also need to revisit possibly the idea. I mean, I was thinking of proposing a condition that would talk about how to treat the 11-foot walls And, you know, I mean, frankly, in the photograph that's on the front of the plans, which is, you know, terrific set of plans, the house has an appearance of sort of a ancient temple to me. And that kind of has to be broken up because this neighborhood doesn't want that, I don't think. So it seems that the feeling of the commissioners is that we need a bit more time, you know, or we would be proposing conditions that might be beyond your ability to analyze here and now as to whether those would require, you know, a continuance. And we do have these, you know, the issues of the survey, which maybe the Harris neighbors might want to conduct, so that they can come up with, you know, let's maybe define what that property line is, and you know, frequently fences are misplaced. It just happens, and I'm an attorney myself. I know about the technical aspect of the, you know, the open notorious use and all that. However, is it worth the litigation over a couple of feet, the length of that fence? So I think, and everybody here basically seems to think that we can get the neighbors together to talk. So I just would like to ask staff if I'm leaning there myself now, although I really like this project. I don't want to put it in jeopardy. And I kind of basically agree with staff, and I think everybody does, that maybe the project should go forward. It's just how it will go forward. So again, I'll ask staff again, because I am the new chair, what the best way to propose a continuance might be.
Ask the applicant's representative if he's amenable to that.
Okay.
To a mutually agreed upon continuance for 90 days.
Would the applicant be able to agree to a mutual agreeable continuance for 90 days?
Yes, that would be agreeable.
Okay, thank you. I would urge you to, you know, use your arborist, get in touch with the Harrises, see if he needs to approach it from their property. I'm sure they will allow some technical scientists to carefully tread their property, et cetera.
If we could just add that our attorney has a form that the property owner is going to have to sign that indicates that you agreed to mutually continue the application.
Okay, thank you, Linda, for that.
So you need to make a motion.
So yes, I would propose a motion to continue this project with the condition that the owner get together with neighbors on agreement with the Planning Commission for 90 days, and that's the motion. I'm proposing the motion. Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I have a friendly amendment, or it's more of a clarification and
Okay.
added detail, of course.
Okay, let's hear it.
That the neighbor, the items that we talked about that we'd like to have come back to us and see, what I heard that we would like to have more information on in order for us to take action are a review of the wall height, either the missing wall effects to soften it, or if it can be moved forward, a lowering of it. There was a conversation about stepping it back so it's not all big. So something different about the wall. Come back with that. A construction plan to deal with. Yes.
Can I just interrupt because I know where you're going, and I think you should put them in the order that you want them, because the applicant should start with the tree report, because if moving the house and compromising the parking isn't going to save the tree, what I thought I heard some of you say is that you wouldn't necessarily want the parking removed if the tree can't be saved anyway.
I hear that, but we can't, we don't have two shots at this. They can't come back and say,
No,
we can't save the tree, but we can make the wall look pretty. And if there's some of us that are like, okay, but you've dealt with everything else but the tree, I don't know that
I wasn't implying that you should not include your other conditions, but I think they start with that tree report, because if they can't move the house, then they're softening the 11-foot wall.
That's fine. These
if
weren't
they
in
can
any,
save
yes.
the tree and move the house, they're softening a 6-foot wall.
That's
See what
fine.
I'm saying?
These were not in any prioritized order. I was just looking down at my sheet of paper. So I can put them in a, I agree with you, and I would take her recommendation in how you go about this. I wasn't, you can put them in the order, you guys are smart and professional to know which comes first and which comes second. These are my scratches on the paper. I just want to make sure they're all out there.
And of course, in that, just a comment, isn't it better that we discuss this now before the house has been built? Just think about the horrendous need to move it after that. No, this is a much better process, of course. During that 90 days, we of course want everybody to confer with staff and make sure that, neighbors may talk and come to some kind of conclusion. Okay, you may agree, but that may not be feasible. So you want to confer with staff as well and the planners.
Oh, and I had one other question before you start, sorry, and I know I'm not supposed to interrupt while you're actually making your motion, but I heard one commissioner say they would like a second opinion from from a different arborist. So if that's the case, you need to make it clear that you are requesting that a second arborist look at the whole situation and not just the same arborist that's already reviewed it.
My friendly amendment wasn't that, but if there's a friendly amendment to my friendly amendment, I'm friendly to that.
No, I think that's an excellent point too. Why not have another opinion? So, yeah.
Okay, I'll just include it. A second, I'm seeing heads shaking for whoever's listening to this, a second arborist report. So I'm going to start with, come back with a further information of the tree assessment from a second arborist to include the variety of tree issues that we've discussed here, including supposed number 22, neighbors' trees, and the other trees. A review of the parking options, which may allow you to move the building forward if you put it in tandem or angled it or something like that, to look at that. I'd love to go back out, but we're right in the middle of the motion. A construction plan that would address the construction.
Actually, if you don't mind, that's typically done with the building official at the building permit stage. It never comes before you. I sit corrected. It has come before you once. Be it.
Okay, then I would just direct staff to include a condition of a requirement of a construction plan, so that the next version that we see adds that as a condition into it.
I actually think it's better for them to, so they could propose a plan that isn't really going to do much, and if they propose it now and everybody has a chance to look at it, we've found that there are actually good suggestions that actually make that plan better if it happens before you take action.
Great. I wasn't going to be prescriptive. I was going to be, or descriptive. I was going to be descriptive. We'd like to see something more about construction. I didn't know what it was. So I think it would go a long way from the applicant to do as much as possible to assuage neighbors' concerns. As detailed as you want to be, probably the better. At very minimum, I would want to see a condition that there is a construction plan before approval. But I think the further you can go, the better. Something about a construction plan is number 3. Something about the wall, depending on what you find out from the arborist, whether it's making it look nicer and softer, lowering it, stepping it. I'm not going to prescribe what that is, but clearly it needs to be re-articulated. And then the only other one that I'm going to throw in here that we haven't really discussed, but was in the committee, the open space committee, was in the proposal, was that the rest of the site is not landscaped, and there was a concern that if we approve it, there's nothing in our approval that that was part of the Hill Area Development Permit, and there's nothing in the permit, in the approval right now that requires it to stay that way as a condition of approving the HRD. It could either, and so I see glasses going on.
So, this is what you want to add this as, you're recommending a condition? I mean,
I'm recommending that the next time that we see this, there is some acknowledgement or addressing of that issue. I'm not prescribing what it is, but that the current application is based on an assumption that it's not landscaped and that the Hill area natural features are there, and therefore we're comfortable approving the Hill area residential permit.
Okay. Let me read you something we prepared for the eventuality of this discussion. And just like with every other project, imposing new conditions of approval or deed restrictions require a careful balancing act that has to consider the nexus between the project's impacts and the conditions itself, as well as the proportionality of the conditions with respect to the impact. It's very hard to find material in the concerns that were expressed by the open space members to support the findings that would be needed to support the nexus and proportionality findings for the conditions proposed in the open space members memo.
That's great. Can that be included in the staff report? That's all I'm asking, is that there's something.
No, this was written for your benefit. This is saying that the commission needs to consider very carefully the nexus between the project's impacts.
Can you hold on a second?
Conditions.
I am not prescribing what should be done to address those issues. I am asking that there is an articulation and acknowledgement of part of our approval has to do with the trees and the landscaping and the natural features of that site.
So perhaps a way to address this is to encourage the applicant to consider the members of the Open Space Committee's concerns about the future disposition of the backyard.
Great. I would like to include that as direction for what we'd like to see. We did just get this. They haven't necessarily had a time to respond. I think it would be helpful. Yes, thank you. What he just said is the last one.
Okay. I think the bottom line is here, though, I mean, the whole thing I see is sort of, you move a little bit and you can give a little bit, and you can change the positioning of the house somewhat, and luckily you're dealing with CAD or something that you can, like deal with it like clay, and it works. So that's what the 90 days is going to do. Assess, between neighbors, owners, and staff, all the issues we discussed tonight with trees, and going with that is whether the house can be moved, whether we can have a parking review, parking options, the wall height, the construction issues, and by the way, in the proposed resolution, there is a very detailed construction plan condition listed, so that's kind of built in. So I'd like to ask for a second to the motion as proposed.
I'll second.
And everybody in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. The owner has agreed to a 90-day continuance. You have 10 days to appeal that, and there's a $500 fee for that appeal. And what's that? Oh, you've agreed. There's no appeal. Thank you. Okay, good. I'll get this chairmanship thing right. Okay, thank you. So everybody who's dealt with the 164 Willow, we're moving on to the next item.
Are we ready?
And item number 4 on our agenda is 15 Wood Lane.
Okay, this project encompasses connecting 2 living levels with an internal stairway, expanding the lower floor, and remodeling the interior living space of an existing duplex in order to convert it to a single-family home. The project will increase the square footage of the structure from 3,170 square feet to 3,422 square feet, and will convert the duplex to a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, single-family residence. The project requires the approval of the following discretionary permits: a Hill Area Residential Development Permit, because the parcel doesn't meet the minimum width requirement based on its slope. Staff has no areas of concern about the proposed remodeling of the house. However, when the applicant submitted a soils report where their soils engineer had identified, actually there was a first report by one soils engineer that just addressed the stability of the soils in the area of the house. When the town engineer went out to look at the site, he discovered that the back area had been excavated substantially to a slope, if I can't even talk, to more than a 2-to-1 slope, which is usually unstable, has to be retained by some kind of a retaining wall. So he requested that the engineer address that back slope that had been excavated without permits. That didn't work out, and so the applicants hired a second engineering firm, and they made 3 recommendations for ways that the project could go forward with the back hill being addressed. Their original recommendation included substantial drainage improvements off-site, which are often difficult to obtain easements and things to do that. So the engineers went back and forth and have reached a design where they're going to beef up the back of the building so that the people inside the house are safe if there is a slide. And the attorney actually got involved the town attorney got involved with the town engineer. And they reviewed all the reports, and we are now to a point where the town engineer and the town attorney are comfortable allowing the commission to proceed with the application as proposed, as long as the owners sign and record a hold harmless document. And it's going to be more than our standard hold harmless condition. So it'll be probably drafted by staff and then reviewed and approved by both the town engineer. Well, it will be, that's the condition. Be reviewed and approved by the town attorney and the town engineer, and that will be paid for by the applicant. That's in the conditions of approval. The project also requires design review because it is a 50% remodel, but most of the work's occurring at the back of the house and doesn't really change the architecture at all. So we have no problems. It complies with the design review criteria. The exception to the code that's being asked for is that they are proposing to skew the third parking space. It's going to be inside the existing parking because the existing garage is located right at the front property line and on the side. They could pull the parking out of the side yard setback, but it would require another kind of variance or the removal of a mature if they straightened it out, it would require the removal of fruit trees. If they moved it somewhere else on the property, it would require a second driveway variance. So in staff's opinion, due to the proximity, it's right next to the neighbor's garage, it's well away from the neighbor's home. The one little corner of the space that's going to project into the side yard setback appears to be a good way to provide the third space and minimize the impacts on this developed site. So we're able to make findings for approval of the requested exceptions and for the Hill Area Residential Development Permit, and we're recommending that you adopt Resolution 1503 approving application 1502 to allow the 50% remodel of 50 Wood Lane.
Okay, thank you very much. Does any member of the commission have any questions of staff on this project?
Can you explain the parking space? I mean, I saw it like on the plan, but I wasn't quite sure how it worked. And with the existing garage and the carport.
They're going to have to drive through the carport to get to the third space.
Okay, and then that still allows you like maneuver to.
Yeah, they can get into it. Our parking space requirements are pretty large, 9 by 20, and so if they have a huge truck, they might not be able to get a huge truck into that third space, but I think you can get a standard or smaller vehicle into there.
Okay, it wasn't clear exactly how that worked, so.
Is there any thought that under the carport would be another parking space? Or is that
So they have one space in the carport and one space in the one-car garage right at the front property line right now. So they're required, Wood Lane, historically, they haven't allowed you to count your property frontage as the street parking for your third space if you're doing a 50% remodel, unless the curb across the street is painted red. And because if it's painted red, then you can fit your one car in there and leave the 12 feet of clearance, it will always be that way. But if both sides are parking is allowed, and you have a car across the street, the third guest space isn't available. See what I'm saying? So in this situation, they are required to provide a third space on the site.
Oh, okay. There's a thank you on that. On the HRD permit, there's a mention in the staff report that the town engineer requested some assurance from the project engineers that the chosen method of securing the site from the potential slide activity would adequately address the concerns they raised in June. Has that been sort of settled? Is that a settled issue now?
Yes. He was very concerned because they originally made it sound like they felt the site couldn't be stabilized unless there was off-site drainage and on-site drainage. And they revisited that issue and provided a letter that said that they feel what they're designing provides enough protection for the residents of the house. So both the town engineer and the applicant's engineer are in agreement that what's been proposed provides an acceptable level of safety for the residents.
Okay. Is there any history of slides in the area?
Yes.
And how major have they been? Major.
There was one on the same side of the street, just 2 doors down, and then there was a house further down on the right where the entire house was destroyed.
Can anything be proposed here under the conditions that might help ameliorate or mitigate or protect against that? Prevention is best thing. You know, the wall at the back of the house being, further strengthened is one thing, but can anything be done, plantings or whatever, to
There's always more that can be done, but there's a cost involved in that. And so if the cost becomes very prohibitive for one homeowner, the town engineer is always mindful of that. And so his approach is to obtain something from their engineer, limiting the liability of the town if it's not done in the way that he would prefer, because engineers have different levels of, I'm not using the right word, but some are more conservative than others, and our town engineer is very conservative, some might say too conservative, so he knows that about himself. And so if another engineer is willing to, in writing, say that it's going to be all right, and that the hillside that's been excavated really hasn't gone anywhere in a number of major storms. It may never go anywhere. The town engineers acknowledge that, but it might. I mean, we have lots of homes on Willow that have similar slopes in the backyard. They've never gone anywhere, but the one 2 doors down has. So it's kind of, you weigh making a property reasonable for a homeowner to live in, or making it so prohibitive that nobody can ever do any work to it. And it's unfortunate that whoever the owner is that excavated it did that. Whoever it was did at least plant some trees, so there's some roots there. There's mature trees holding that excavated slope. It's not like it's just a bare hillside. But the town engineer would probably prefer to see more, but he's satisfied.
Okay.
He's satisfied with the hold harmless and with the design that the other engineer has come up with.
Okay, thank you. Further comments?
I have a question. On the guest space parking, it says that it is within the required 5-foot side yard setback. Has the neighbor on that side, or is there a neighbor on that side, Have they been notified?
Yes, they received a notice.
And they're okay with it?
Well, they never came to see us, and I don't know if they're here or not. The reason we send the notice out is so that if they are concerned, they can show up or send something in writing, and we haven't gotten anything.
Okay.
What are the parking requirements for the existing, I know it's probably a legal non-conforming if there's only two spaces, but if it, as a duplex, how many total spaces normally have to be required?
5.
So right now it's got 2. So it's legal non-conforming, missing 3.
Right.
So we're asking them to add 1, and they're changing it, and they have to increase it by 1. So in some respects, it makes it more conforming? I mean, it makes it fully conforming with 3.
It'll conform with regards to the parking requirement for a single-family residence.
For a single-family residence, because theoretically, moving from a duplex to a single-family residence, you're reducing the number of people associated with the building driving, theoretically.
Theoretically, and the 3 spaces meets the code requirement.
Right, so. And there was a question about how many spaces could be squeezed under the carport, and our site, you mentioned something like the size that we require is large, and we've had conversations in the past about allowing smaller spaces if we're needing an extra squeezy little bit.
It's a small carport. There's just 1 space in it. There's not the ability to provide a second space under the existing carport.
Any further questions of staff? Okay. Then will the applicant please step forward and present, make any comments or views? Thank you. Push the button on the stand, and then the red light goes on, then we can hear you.
My name is Mark Bruce. Thank you for hearing our project. I'm going to keep this brief. You know, basically we're an existing duplex in an RS6, which is a single-family zone. We're proposing to convert the duplex to a single family, keeping it in character with the neighborhood and the existing home. It is a 50% remodel, and we are just planning to capture the space that's within the existing building footprint. So nothing that's beyond that, and I'm here to answer any questions, but that's all I'm really wanting to present.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the owner? Hearing no questions from the planning commissioner for the owner, then would the public, any member of the public here for this project, care to make any comments? And there is a requested 3-minute limit. No, nobody's here to make any comment. Okay, very good. Well, then we'll throw this out to discussion on the planning commission, and let's hear what we have to say.
I'm happy with the application. I don't really have any, the only item in the conditions that I would like to maybe see elaborated was because the town engineer Ray did had the concerns about the back wall. I mean, there's just one small mention of the recommendations in the Miller Pacific report, but I just think that maybe we should elaborate, saying that these recommendations should be detailed in the building permit application, and I just want to make sure that those recommendations are detailed and documented, so that they're.
Would it work for you to just make it conditioned that the town engineer review the building permit plan for compliance with the Miller Pacific report? Would that work?
Yes.
Okay.
I just think we just need to elaborate.
So add that as a condition, that the building permit plans be reviewed by the town engineer for compliance with the Miller Pacific's report.
final report. There is condition number 2. I'm just saying that mentions the Miller Pacific letters, which I think were in response to the town engineer's questions. I just think we just need to add a little bit more, make sure that in the building permit phase, that that the town engineer approves them.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you.
I just have a comment about the design. I think the designer did a great job in consolidating the spaces. Are you the designer? Yes. Yeah. You got rid of a lot of little rooms that were, just breaking things up, and you kept the walls that made sense. So I just wanted to applaud you on your design.
Any other comments?
I'm always in favor of a renovation that maintains the existing building footprint, so that's a good one. It makes me a little worried about our housing numbers because we're losing a unit, but that's okay. We'll find it somewhere else. In addition to really enjoying the design itself, I appreciate the set that is here. This is a tight set, great to read. Thank you. This is also a great site, and normally I'd be like, hey, where's the landscape plan? But I also love the fact that all of the existing landscape that's there, little orchard and some of the existing stuff stays. It may be hard to protect that stuff during construction, but I'm happy to see that you're being really respectful of the context of the neighborhood too. So I think it's a great project. So.
Yes, I applaud anything that's helping the neighbors. Shelley, did you have another comment? Sure. Okay. Well, I thought I'd go last, actually.
I was just going to echo, I appreciate keeping within the footprint. I too, the loss of 2 units going to 1 unit, but this fits within exactly what the FAR, all of those kinds of things. There's really not a whole lot of, you're looking for there's not a whole lot that we're being asked of here except for parking again. And we're not losing a space, we're just a variance to, again, squeeze it in. And we're actually improving the parking situation because as a duplex, it needs 5 parking spaces. It doesn't have 5 parking spaces. So right now, according to the use that it's supposed to be having, we're having more parking impact than we will have converting it to a single use. So we're improving the parking situation. We're losing a unit. So all of that being said, I think it's a good design. I appreciate fitting it within that. It's big, but it's already big, so you can't really, there you go. If you want to put a micro in-law unit somewhere down the road, we'd love to have a small granny unit somewhere. Think about it when you're building it, maybe to make some flexibility in there. Just putting in a pitch, right? So I think you've done well with this. I think we're bringing it into compliance. You said it's a single-family zone. It's going to be a single-family house. We're improving the parking. It's in the footprint. So there you have it.
And those are the goals of doing this process, is to improve the physical and view of the area. If there are no other comments, I have a couple of really specific and not impactful, I'll say, condition language to change. On page 2 of the resolution 1503, after paragraph that says numbered 15, there's a whereas. What I'd like to do is change that to based on the foregoing instead of whereas. And then under number 1, prior to issuance of the, change it to based on the foregoing. Instead of whereas. That's page 2 of the resolution, 1503.
Between 15 and 1?
Right. Between 15 and 1. There's a reason for that. Typically, whereases are not necessarily considered part of the contract. And so, please feel free to run that by the town attorney too, obviously.
So you're changing a whereas to a therefore,
To
essentially?
based on the foregoing or therefore. And then on paragraph numbered 1, this hold harmless and indemnity document, that's a separate document, then there is a kind of indemnity clause in the conditions, but this additional document, I would like to change the language as follows. A hold harmless and indemnity document, so the words and indemnity between harmless and document, and then after the word frontage, basically this is now incorporating the language that's mentioned earlier in the report. So the language is and holding the town harmless from any actions taken, etc., from future landslides on the site. That language that is in the report, which is on page 4, sort of the second full paragraph down at the top of page 4 of the staff report.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened in that hold harmless, because that maintenance easement thing is not supposed to be in there. It's supposed to be about the stability. So what did you say, page 4, take the language from?
Take the language from where it says the town engineer and town attorney are comfortable, etc.
Oh, okay.
From the word where it says holding the town harmless from any actions, that language be added to after the word frontage on page 2, paragraph 1 of the resolution.
Got it.
And then one more thing. I would make there's condition 5G in the resolution, which finishes up on page 4, and then I would add a 5H.
Okay.
That basically talks to what Laura was saying earlier about having a condition that brings in the language of the structural report that will be reinforced pursuant to applicant's engineer's final design proposal and inspection of the town engineer.
H is going to be that the construction drawings are reviewed by the town engineer for compliance with the geotechnical engineer's reports.
Yes,
like that? Okay.
That's fine. Okay. That's great.
Those 5E is kind of the same thing as what you're adding 5H.
Well,
maybe
5H is honing in on that wall, on that retaining.
But maybe we can elaborate E.
We can do that. Sure, that works. That's great. Saves ink also. Okay, and those are my only changes to the resolution. And it sounds like overall the commission is for the project. We like your plans. These are really excellent plans, and wish the paper was a little smaller is all. But so if there's no more discussion, I would propose a motion to approve the. Can I
do that?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 1503 for the application 15-02, 15 Wood Lane, with the additional language discussed regarding engineering.
I'll second the motion. I can't second the motion. Okay.
I'd like to second the motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Congratulations, and good luck with your proposed changes.
And just a reminder, Phil, just a reminder, Phil, that you have to advise them
I
of
have
the
to
appeal.
advise you about the appeal process. You have 10 days to appeal. There's a $500.
Not him, but members of the public.
Excuse me?
Oh, forgive me, you're right.
One can appeal.
Okay, so you have 10 days to appeal the decision to the town council. There's a $500 fee, and you should contact the town clerk regarding that.
And anybody in the public can do so also.
Anybody in the public can appeal the decision, yes, of course.
I believe he was using the usted version of you, as in you all out there.
Okay. Moving on with our agenda. Okay, we're going to, any comments on the minutes from the meeting of December 18, 2014? Comments, changes, etc. Okay, hearing
My
none.
name has an E.
Oh, excuse me.
My name has an E.
God, you're so demanding.
Okay, we'll definitely make note of that.
After 8 years.
And any other comments?
Have I not read the other?
It has us like that missing W from the typewriter during one president's term. So hearing no other comments on the minutes, motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the draft minutes of the December 18, 2014 meeting.
And second?
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 And abstentions, any opposed? No. Okay. Now we move on to discussion items. And our zoning ordinance lists and creation and updating. I might make a comment if that's, it says commissioner comments and requests here, but do you have a report?
Just for you if you want to revisit the list, which you do not have to do at all.
Okay, okay. Let me make one.
What a surprise.
Let me make this comment, though. I attended a GPIC meeting a week ago, and a big item is the affordable housing and the the housing density bonuses and other concessions that by state law the town is required to at least look at, examine, and potentially provide to developers of affordable housing. I just want to say that this is going to be an issue. We're going to have to look into this fairly closely, and we can't be dictatorial about it, but we should examine tweaks that we might be allow and tweaks that we may not want to because of the nature of our town. And that's my comment for now. We'll get into more detail as we go. Okay, so Shelley.
I won't go through the laundry list that I was creating during our first discussion on this. I will submit it to all of us in an email. I was just wanting to make a comment that I was struck again how I've been on the commission for 8 years, and we continue to have projects that are creatively limited by our inaction. And by that I mean that we have not acted on tandem parking. We have not acted on so many of those laundry lists. We keep seeing projects with this upward, downward slope height issues, with parking, not whether or not they should have 3, but whether they can be angled and tandemed, and creative with the way that they address parking, so we don't have to mess with trees and we can address neighbors' issues. So I'm just wanting to express that I'm frustrated that we are hemming people's creativity by not taking action on some of the things that we know that we should take action on, because it would allow architects and property owners the ability to look at their site in different ways, that when they come before us, we tell them to go look at. So they come before us and then we say, well, gee, we'd really like you, if you just did this with your parking, you could lower the wall, you could move the thing, boom. They didn't know that they didn't know that we're open to that kind of stuff. And so I'm just, or maybe they do because you talk to them, I don't know, but again and again and
They
again.
originally came in with the parking exactly the way you guys directed them to go look at, right? And we have a code that requires 3 spaces. There's no way that staff could anticipate what tree is going to be important to a neighborhood. It has to happen at the public hearing. So I understand what you're saying. I just think that Fairfax, the hillsides and the lots are so diverse that you're never going to be able to put a town code together that,
I'm not, and I'm by inaction.
You have to have this process.
And by inaction, I am not in any way addressing staff at all. So don't take, I'm not talking about staff at all. At all. I'm just saying I've been here for 8 years, and some of these things we've been talking about that we should deal with for 8 years. That's a long time. That's a long time to be us up here saying, yeah, we all think that tandem parking should be changed in our parking. 8 years of everybody agreeing. We're like violently agreeing with each other, and so.
So is that something that we would agendize here for discussion and then send up to the council? Or can we just like make a bumper sticker and send it, like, council, deal with tandem parking? Or how do we,
instead of just have another line item that says, let's make our list longer, do something about stuff on that list?
Yeah, because we do have this actually pretty good list of things that I think it started with, we're going to update the whole zoning code. So these are the things that we want to address when that happens. Now, our process has been a little derailed this year.
You guys could make that a priority to discuss it at one of your meetings, but you may have forgotten that you did discuss it, and you have so many changes that need to be made to the code. Each time you introduce an ordinance change, it's a lot of work, and so if you combine them all, it makes noticing in the paper and all these different steps that have to be taken, it's redundant. You're doing it over and over and over and over again for every change you want to make. So the original thought was that eventually you would get a good body of them and try to present it as one massive ordinance change, which is how the town did it. You have your major zoning ordinances. First Ordinance 5 that was in effect for like 12 years, then Ordinance 230, then Ordinance 365. So, you can do these little piecemeal things, but it just doesn't seem very efficient when you have such a limited staff, limited budget. Everything has to be noticed in the newspaper. So that was the thought of trying to get a good body together. But at any time, if you guys feel the pressure is really great, you can identify and, have discussion and make a motion to direct staff to start drafting an ordinance. It just seems...
And I think the frustrating part is I get a sense that town council would rather have it in a piecemeal fashion than everything together.
And I just think the piecemeal, you end up forgetting, you do these piecemeal changes and it's not, you don't look at, you end up affecting some other section that you haven't really thought about.
Again,
I don't do it.
I'm going to defer to Shelby. I'm going to defer to Shelby, and yet, if we never get to the finish line, there are some things that I think we see again and again, and I am the last person, if you've listened to me over the 8 years, to ask to piecemeal anything.
Yeah.
And we need to do something. The inactivity in this town is ridiculous on many different levels.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to express that I think it's time to act.
Well, what I was going to say, for those of you guys who weren't part of the early part of this discussion, is that when we were going to update our zoning code, like the whole big thing, like you're saying, this list was generated to, let's not forget to do this when we update the zoning thing. So then, you know, we've had a few things come up since then, since that discussion, and we've kind of lost track of that. And so it may be worth looking at kind of the middle ground of that. Instead of waiting until the zoning code is updated, it may be worth saying, well, these things kind of go together. So, or these are the biggest bumps. I loved that analogy of the bumps. And they really hang us up. And so if we're going to lump some issues into new ordinance activity, let's make it like things, or let's make sure that we've really considered the repercussions of them and that they're grouped together in a less suspicious way so that it's easy to decipher what the intent of redoing these ordinances are, and that that they might actually live through the process. So that's my opinion.
Well, I agree we need to identify things that are similar and ordinances that affect each other, so that tandem parking might affect setbacks, for example, might affect FAR. And we need to do it in some fashion where I would suggest if we have a week, a month where we have maybe one project or a lot of consent items, that we consider really starting this as a section of every meeting and saying, first, get the ordinances together that we want to work on, prioritize those, get those, let's make an agreement among us to put ordinances together that we want to prioritize, and then let's just stick with that. And then if we finish that project, then we'll get to another set of priorities. Another thing that seems to be the case in Fairfax is that we can't start thinking, letting the public think like we're shoving something secret down their throat. I mean, the way some cities can sell a new ordinance is to say, look, if we can pass this, you might be able to get a more discretionary permit and avoid a hearing. And those are the kinds of things we want to be looking at, if we can, things that we are constantly dealing with that we shouldn't necessarily be dealing with, that could have, you know, a discretionary permit or an over-the-counter permit where now it requires a hearing. Those are the kinds of things that hold projects up for months. And those are kind of the ordinances we want to look at first. So again, it's tandem parking and FAR and that kind of thing. So I would recommend, I'm going to request of staff that if we have less than 2 discussion projects in any next month or in any month, that we definitely put an item on the agenda fairly permanently this year to have an ordinance discussion.
Can I make a friendly amendment before we direct staff to that? I was going to say, you know, we used to have 2 meetings a month when I came on for a number of years. I know you guys are overloaded, and I want to go back to 2 meetings a month. Perhaps this deserves a workshop. 1 month, we pick a month, we say, you know what, we are going to have 2 meetings in this month. One's our regular meeting, and one is a workshop solely devoted to prioritizing this list, having conversation, not making any decision other than to prioritize, hear from staff. What do you think is connected? I mean, you guys know all of this stuff inside and out. You know, if we do this, what else do we need to look at? But really just have a time dedicated. I don't think we're going to find, it may be another 6 months if we wait until we have a light load. I don't know what we're looking at, but that's an alternate approach, would be to say in January, February, March. I don't know what it is because I don't know what the calendar of stuff is coming up. But I think if we say that, we might be waiting for a long time. So I don't know what other people's opinions are on having I'm calling it a workshop because it's a single item meeting that is less 3 minutes at the podium, blah, 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 and more
working
Well, would it
together.
help if we put discussion of a second meeting on the next agenda? Everyone can like look at their schedules and see, because I think, was it first and third Thursdays were when you guys used to do it? But that's hard for staff because we have a council meeting the first Wednesday.
Well, I would say having a second meeting every month would be difficult. I mean,
I'm not proposing a second meeting, I'm
no,
proposing
but
pick 1
I
month.
also want to say, we could start out this process with a special meeting. It'd have to, I guess, publicly noticed and publicly held. That would be like a workshop we could have maybe in the next month or so, or March. I must say, I probably won't be here for the next
So how
hearing.
about this? How about if we itemize for your next month's meeting the prioritization of the list you've created, discussion of the priorities of the discussion on the list and creating a priority, and scheduling the first workshop to tackle the highest priorities on that list. We agendize it for the next meeting under the discussion items. You know, and we'll send you in the report ahead of time, we'll send you the list of what you've created. And then you guys come to the meeting prepared with your, triage, what's the highest 3 issues. And then whichever gets the highest vote among you, we take that to the first workshop and you decide on the date for the workshop.
That's good, Linda. What's in the pipeline? Does that seem like we're not going to be here till 1 o'clock in the morning next time?
If we don't schedule it, it's not going to happen.
Right, and I agree with that. Let's do that. And I'd also recommend that, staff feel free to prioritize in that list.
I'm sorry, we really want to get your, they're all important in a way, but I want to address the frustration you feel with not having gotten to what you think is the most important. And if you can convince the others that what you're thinking is the most important, like tandem parking, then let's go there and not try to bite off more than we can chew. Because remember, you may get it up to the council and they may go, no. So let's just pick off one that's the most important as a body and have a whack at it. And I remind you, you just massaged 2 ordinances that got continued last night because two council people made changes before it even came to them. And so it's like, well, wait a second. And so I had to insist that, the council's got to see what you approved. I don't care if people are adding changes before they discuss it, but they need to see what you approved, aside from the red line that they're doing before a hearing, So we just amended 2 ordinances, and anyway, we had a big one repealed last year that we're still dealing with. So anyway, so okay. Does that sound like a plan? Okay.
That's a great plan.
Okay.
I believe I put this item on, but I want to make sure because it came up again on the Willow about, keeping areas of the lot undeveloped, natural state requirements when you're with a HRD permit or something. And it was kind of in a way associated with Wood Lane too, because the back of the property got developed and then it turned out to be issued. So just want to make sure that item is on the list.
And I'll email you the rest of mine so we don't have to.
Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry. No, not quite. All right.
That was our discussion.
Planning Director's report.
I'd like to think we're there.
No.
But by the way,
sorry.
I think you actually kind of combined discussion items with commissioners' comments and requests.
If that's true, then I have
So, but you can revisit commissioners' comments and requests after I'm done.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, I'm going to try and be brief. I want to just echo what you said about the GPIC meeting. One thing that came out of it was a ad hoc subcommittee with Phil and Edie Newton, chair of the Open Space Committee, to draft recommended changes, recommended policy approaches to the density bonus ordinance that we are required via the existing general plan to draft. And we can't supersede the state requirements, but we can massage those requirements and give prioritization that, if we're going to relax design guidelines, that we would prefer these as opposed to others. There's hot and button issues like height. We want to avoid height. Depending on locations, parking might be the way to go. So that's coming. And that'll be an important piece of GPIC.
Can we be more forceful than just say we prefer?
This is going to be a long process to get the language up to you, and then you'll make recommendations to the council, and then they'll, and this is going to be a very contentious discussion because density bonus law is created to go right in the face of communities that are NIMBY. And it's to limit a community's ability to restrict the development of affordable housing. And that's going to make a lot of people unhappy, and that's what the law is designed to do. So fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a rough ride. Okay, next.
So, but my comment on that, across the country, density bonuses are hugely successful, and they're met with a lot of success in getting housing, and in particular, getting a mix of affordable housing with market rate housing, which doesn't apply as much here, but in most very heavily populated areas, a mix of 15% affordable housing with 85% market rate housing tends to be the winning formula.
And I wasn't speaking against it. I was just gingerly, diplomatically articulating what the intent of the law is. I would encourage you to look online at the report that we provided the town council last night, a report on the status of the housing element update. Okay, it's very thorough. It was a sort of a follow-up to the joint meeting we had here with the Affordable Housing Committee. And at the end of that report, it's got a timeline going forward to the end goal of May 6 adoption, council adoption of the housing element update. First up, as required by HCD, is a pre-draft workshop next Thursday in this room, starting at 5. It was going to go 5 to 7, but at the request of Councilperson Goddard last night, who received information from several people who wanted to be here and couldn't be that early, we're going to extend it from 5 to 9, and we're just going to repeat the session at 7. Okay, so we have 2 rounds so we can accommodate folks. It will be televised, it will be videotaped, and it's just for staff to lay out the requirements by law for the town to supply a variety of housing to all income ranges, and then to engage the public in feedback. Pre-draft, it's required. But I would encourage you to look at that timeline because it's going to move very fast. After that, we'll receive an admin draft within the next couple of weeks. We will vet that admin draft, and then we will schedule a joint meeting again with the Planning Commission and Affordable Housing Committee. And we had planned to do that before your next regular meeting from 5 to 7 beforehand. And Mayor Kohler said that she has a conflict with coming then, so we'll have to revisit that, and all these dates are kind of massageable. After that, it'll go up to council in March. Presumably council will hopefully make the changes to the draft and send it on to HCD. We'll also have an addendum to the mitigated neg deck parallel to that hopefully, even though we don't have to circulate it, they'll approve for circulation, and we'll put that out to circulation. Then we hope to get the comments back from HCD less than their statutory requirement of 60 days because our handler knows our housing element that was certified in November 13 intimately close. And the only foreseen changes at this point is adding 16 units, either informal or new, over the next 8 years, in addition to the opportunity sites that accommodate 124. So the 124, well, anyway, I'm getting in the woods. So let's see it. So and after it goes up to the state, it comes back, and then it'll come to you one more time in April at your regular April meeting. And presuming that you recommend approval, it goes up to council on May 6th. Then we would make the critical date of May 31st to get that 8-year cycle review. And we can actually lag with the state in terms of working out any wrinkles, which I foresee is only regarding the second unit quota. And that can come after that. And by the way, part of our analysis we're doing is called a AB 1233 analysis, which by doing that, we get an additional year to implement the zoning changes called for in the past housing element. So we then get to January 31st, 2016. Okay, so that's my life for the next 4 months is big on that. Last night they blessed on the consent calendar. After punting for 2 meetings, we finally put it on the consent calendar, which was a follow-up to the last forum looking at Tenolima and School Street Plaza. And part of that was also a recommendation from GPIC subsequent to that forum about having heard all the public's concern about traffic, holding a traffic forum. So this spring, I'll probably be asked to do a traffic forum. And then likewise, in that report that the council blessed last night on the consent calendar, it also talked about going forward with the third and final forum on the existing housing element with regards to the policy of converting CH to CC. That will probably not occur till the summer. Okay? Let's assume all this goes forward and we get all that done. Then we're back on track for talking about the town center plan process that we fortunately had scoped out in a great approach to doing it, and hopefully we'll get back on track for that. And lastly, let's see, I think that's it. As Shelley said, we have, for those watching now or on tape, we have 2 vacancies. Shelley and Esther were just appointed last night. We're going to lose Shelby after tonight, which we mentioned earlier tonight with your proclamation of appreciation. Thank you so much for all your service. And it's, you know, it's like Hotel California. You can, you know, leave, but you can never check out. We're still going to need you around here for advice, and I know you've got a very busy practice, so thank you on that. But so we'll have 2 vacancies, and if you know anyone out there, as Shelley was saying, please encourage them to apply. And with that, I think I'm out of what to say.
Did they fill the empty council seat?
They interviewed 2 candidates had dropped out. Lou Tremaine and Jody Timms had dropped out. There were 4 candidates. There was Cindy Swift and Taylor Watts and Bruce Ackerman and Peter Lax. And they picked 2, they chose 2 each, and Bruce Ackerman got 4 votes, Peter Lax got 3, and Cindy Swift got 1. So Bruce and Peter are the top 2. They'll come back on the 28th of this month, I think at 4:30 in the afternoon, and they'll do a half-hour give and take with each of them, and then an hour of deliberations, and then pick one. So thanks. Yes, and I think it'll be, I'm not sure if it'll be televised or streamed. I'm not sure. I would presume it would be. Any other, anyway, so there's a lot going on. And also I just want to back up to the frustration on, you know, getting to the code stuff. You know, we're a small staff and we work at a fast pace, as you can tell in some of my memos, the typos, and you know, sometimes we just don't have the luxury of getting all done that we'd like to get done. We have no admin in our department. We have no public works director in this town, which means I lost 1/4 of the building official, Mark Lockaby. He's now public works manager. I have 1/4 less staff.
The reality is that when we lose any positions at town hall, everyone ends up picking up parts of the public works.
That's right. So I mean, it bugs the living heck out of me when Linda has to stuff envelopes and put stamps on as a principal planner at a very healthy salary. It's just like, it just doesn't make sense, but we just don't have time. So I have my frustrations too. I'd like an admin. I'd like a public works director. I'd like my building official back. I'd like a place for our files. We're running out of space. It is.
And the town would be better for all of that. I agree with you.
So it is very frustrating. And then also, as you spoke, Mr. Chair, about giving staff more authority, discretionary review on things, it's been the opinion of our principal planner here in her 28 years that it has been a very concerted effort to not give staff discretionary review over the history of this town. That is not wanted. Staff traditionally, up until lately, I would argue, hasn't trusted staff. They don't want staff to have any authority. Likewise, from what I've heard in the good old days, the code is set up to not be simple to navigate. So, and those fights, I think, will come back. The people responsible for those things are still very much alive and very much feel ownership to the town code, which I describe as Byzantine. So, you know, that's sometimes the parameters of how the realities. Now, lastly, I will say one thing also in terms of what you mentioned tonight with the tree committee. You asked a very good question about procedures in terms of how, I would actually like to follow up on that and get a legal opinion on the end run. And why I was shaking my head no, and I didn't mean to appear draconian with you though, I just didn't want to get into the procedural discussion of how things are set up now when you're entertaining a distinct application. But your point is well taken, what happens. And I think ultimately what happens is there's a confidential memo that's sent to the town council when it finally gets up on appeal that the town is in a not a good position, and then the decision is ultimately made that entitlements reign. That would be my guess. So, but I think it's an important conversation to have with council, and I will follow up and ask, okay? But I think we'll see what the answer is, but I think that's the answer.
And I don't know if there's colleagues that have alternate procedures that they might offer up in terms of other best practices with initial reviews or draft reviews. I mean, I don't know what you know, we had this same discussion about design review where there's this kind of chicken and egg situation with design review. What if design review approves? Anyhow, we had the same chicken and egg conversation with design review. So in addition to looking at legal, maybe we can all look at other best practice.
Okay, that's my report.
Well, thank you. I think what we want to avoid having the appearance of sort of putting on the gauntlet whenever we change an ordinance, so that we come up with nice, reasonable explanations as to why we're doing it in plain English and graphics where possible. So, okay, at this point, I think I'm safe to... Okay, commissioner comments. Safe to go to commissioner comments and requests. I was just about to say that.
I wanted to say this when we actually had a public in the room, and I so hope that they're out there somewhere, but I don't know about that. But I got all choked up when I looked at Shelley and I couldn't even squeak a word out. So what I want to say is it's just been such an honor and a privilege to be up here with you guys and to work for this town. This is an amazing town. And with all our foibles, I love it here. But what I really want to say, and I love the work that you guys are doing and everything that you bring to this team, but we would be nothing without you two. Truly. And so I'm well into my 13th,
here.
Yeah, I'm well into my 13th year of either design review or planning commission. And all of those years are with Linda. And Linda, I so appreciate what you do every single day, and the flack, searching for words there, flack that you put up with and the grace that you are under fire. And you've taught me so much about how to deal with other planners in other towns for my profession. You've made me a better landscape architect and a better professional. And I want to thank you personally for all you do. Jim, it's an honor to work with you, to have you in Fairfax. The caliber of our planning director is so high, and I'm so appreciative that you're here. Thank you. So I just wanted that on the record. So thank you.
And actually, as much as I might like to adjourn, I do have a comment.
You tried 3 or 4 times at least.
Just a couple of things. I mean, we have Jim mentioned in the GPIC that because we approved a couple more housing units, you know, we're easier now with HRD, and so, you know, that's good work that we do, and we almost inadvertently do it, but we do it. Absolutely. But there's a couple of frustrations I have, and one is projects that haven't necessarily been done, like the Java Hut. That was a beautiful plan. The extending of the fence for noise, you know, at the Good Earth. Was that done? Okay, I didn't notice that. And I guess that had an impact because the neighbor hasn't been back, so that's good. You know, and the idea is, for me, I just want to see things, you know, maintain and improve and keep this wonderful town as wonderful as it is. So thank you guys, yes, absolutely. And thank you, Shelby, for being the person we had to have here. If we could not do design review, I don't think, without you.
Sure you could.
Well, we could try, but
Before we adjourn.
it's all good.
I do just want to thank Shelby, and I wasn't here last month, both Shelby and Brandon leaving. I've been on the commission 2 years now, and the two of them and Shelley were the veterans when I came on board. You and I were the newbies. And I just have the utmost respect as a professional, as a commissioner. I think the three of you, they just brought so much, and I just had the utmost respect for everything you brought. So I'm sad to see you go, but thank you.
Can I also say thank you? I should tell you that you were one of the determining factors for me applying, because of the way you handled yourself and the humanity that you bring to your comments and, you know, your sensitivity. So you're a great role model. I've learned a lot from you, and I am really sorry to see you go. So.
Okay, now, you know what I'm going to do from now on? I think when Jim starts putting on his sweater, that's when we can make the motion to adjourn.
It's like Mr. Rogers.
There you go. Change your shoes.
So I will propose that entertain a motion to adjourn, please. All in favor?
Aye.
And it was probably the only time I'll ever do this. Carried. Thank you.